or mobile phones are switched off. If you are participating in Teams, when you're not speaking or being asked to speak, please mute your microphone. If you do not mute your microphone, it will be muted for you. To assist people viewing the meeting, could everyone participating via the Teams turn off their cameras and only turn them on when speaking, and also introduce themselves whenever they speak? To ensure the smooth running of the meeting, could members wishing to speak via Teams please use the hand up facility wherever possible, and please do not speak until asked to do so by myself. Could those members in the chamber please raise their hands whenever they wish to speak, and please get them as high as possible. Please note that the meeting is currently being webcast live. In order to make it easier for those watching the meeting, I am proposing that members in the chamber do not need to stand when speaking. They do, however, need to wear a mask at all times except when speaking. Please note that to avoid the chat function on Microsoft Teams being used inappropriately, it has been disabled for this meeting. May I remind everyone that I intend to adhere strictly to the timing set out in the Constitution. It is clear, based on the conversations I've had with many members, that we will not be getting to the motions this evening due to the time constraints, unfortunately. As I have been saying, this is not sustainable in the long term, and I will be meeting group leaders in September, face-to-face, to discuss potential future formats of council meetings. This is an issue that all 54 members of this council have. It's not down to individuals, it's not down to groups. We've all got this problem, and we must find a way forward. So, item 16, apologies.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Pauline Hellier-Summons and Maria G.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other apologies from the floor? No. So we move now on to the minutes of the previous meeting, which I believe have been circulated on. You should have them in front of you. Are there any queries on the minutes? May I remind you, minor changes can be done here and absorbed, but anything major, you need to do that in advance by a motion submitted to me. So I'm looking around for anybody's hands. I can't see anything. I'm looking at Teams, can't see anything. So therefore, I will sign those minutes as a true record at the appropriate time. Declarations of interest, item 18. Do we have any declarations of interest? Okay, Councillor Jones.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I am a governor of the Royal Berkshire Hospital Foundation Trust and will be speaking on item number 28.
And Councillor Halsall, please.
I'm a director of Optilis Holdings Limited, and I will be speaking on the council-owned companies.
Thank you. One last call for any other declarations of interest.
Yes, okay. Yes, Keith. Lindsay here.
Okay, go ahead, Lindsay.
I was a non-executive director of Loddon Homes until the 12th of July. Thank you.
Okay. Enjoy your retirement. Councillor Munro.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I declare an interest as I'm a director of WBC Holdings, and I will be speaking on the subject later in the meeting.
Thank you very much. I can't see anybody else on Teams. Councillor Kaiser.
Yes, I'm declaring the same, Mr. Mayor. I'm a director of companies that are owned by the council and will be speaking on it tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kaiser. Is there any?
Okay.
Councillor Eunice. It's all right.
Mr. Mayor, just yes, the same as well on my side. I want to declare my interest as a newly appointed non-executive director of London Homes.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Yunus. Interesting. Right, I think we. Oh, Councillor Jorgensen.
Yes, the same as Councillor Yunus, I would like to declare an interest as a newly appointed director of London Homes.
Thank you, Councillor Jorgensen. Any others? Okay, so now moving on to item 19, Mayor's announcements. I don't intend to make any announcements. You see what I've been doing in front of you. You can all read it. Anybody who wants to got any questions, please contact me afterwards. But I would like to just make one reminder that all members have been sent a Teams invite to the domestic abuse training being held at 7 p.m. on Monday, the 26th of July. I would encourage all members to attend the training. So if you haven't signed up for it, please try and find some time in your diary. This is a very, very important subject matter, particularly exacerbated because of the pandemic. And I think we all need to be knowledgeable about it. If you no longer have the invite and you wish to attend, please contact Democratic Services. Right, item 20, we're going to move on to the public question time. This lasts for 30 minutes and I will be quite rigid closing off after 30 minutes. Can I remind that any supplementary questions must relate either to the original question or to the response, the answer that has been given to that question, and must not be longer than 1 minute and should not introduce news topics or be a speech. So the first one is Al Neil to ask his question of Councillor Barr.
Hello.
Yeah, we can hear you. We can hear you.
Right, hello. Thanks, Al Neil, early resident. Right, yes, my question is to the Executive Member for Environment and Leisure. The Laurel Park sports field in Early currently accommodates parking for 60 cars, but has no facilities to park bicycles. Also, the park is poorly connected to the Early cycling network, with the main entrance in Maresfield running into a busy main road, Rushy Way. Given the council has the following policies that encourage cycling: climate emergency, sustainable travel, air quality action plan, creating physically active communities, and sustainable environment strategy. And also that given the amount of disruption in Maresfield, the connecting roads to the residents because of parking. And so in light of the borough's proposal to build a 3G pitch and additional 50 car parking places at Laurel Park, can the executive member commit to installing significant cycle parking at Laurel Park before any new development takes place?
Councillor Barr.
Thank you, Mr. Neil, for your question. I totally agree with you. Mr. Neil, you are pushing against an open door. Consideration will be given to all potential users of the proposed new facility as part of the design development process, and appropriate arrangements will be put in place to satisfy the user needs and requirements in line with the current council policies and national guidance, which will include assessment of means of transport, including cycling. The proposal will be available for further consultation during the planning application process.
Mr. Neil, do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, thank you for that answer. Yes, I mean, given that, I mean, the draft LC WIP local cycling and walking infrastructure plan has just been published, and that Laurel Park isn't even connected to any of the proposed routes, which you given this such a major project, I mean, that seems a bit of an oversight. So can I ask, you know, instead of planning to increase the parking there by 83%, which is what the 50 extra car parking spaces represents, would the increasing use of the park better be targeting active travel, public transport, and I would invite the executive member to commit to a 0 increase in car traffic rather than 83% increase.
Councillor Bath, can you respond?
Mr. Neil, the new facilities, improved facilities, including the 3G pit, will require the additional car parking and, of course, provisions for cyclists, because the use of that park will increase proportionately, and therefore the car parking is necessary. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Neil, for your question. Next person, Mr. Humphreys. Are you there?
I'm certainly there, Keith.
Please ask your question.
Okay. It's somewhat bizarre that whilst the council is basking in the reflected publicity of its partnership with TVP on the campaign to discourage drivers from passing too close to cyclists, its highways department is actively encouraging motorists to overtake within a nanometre of a cyclist's life. Take New Wokingham Road. As the executive member can see from the picture provided, the council have installed red tarmac overlaid with diagonal stripes to dissuade motorists from deviating from their lane to overtake cyclists, encouraging them to barge cyclists off the road as the lanes are now not wide enough for a vehicle and a cycle to pass side by side. Numerous traffic islands make it difficult for motorists to overtake. Those that do either cut in too close to cyclists or pass the wrong side of the islands to avoid slowing down. Can I surmise the council view accidents as an NHS problem whilst the extra paintwork is a cost purely for residents? Interestingly, as soon as the road crosses into Bracknell Forest, that council has opted for a conventional single centre line to give cyclists more space. Are council planning to make this vanity project, make safe this vanity project before a cyclist is killed?
Councillor Jorgensen.
Thank you for your question, Peter. The traffic management scheme on New Wokingham Road, I'm told was installed over a decade ago and was introduced to tackle vehicle high speeds and to encourage speed limit compliance. The approach taken to reduce the effective width of the road using red tarmac and hatching along with the traffic islands to prevent overtaking, and the installation of vehicle active speed signs is a recognised speed management approach and has proved to be successful. Our data shows vehicle speeds are broadly compliant with the 30-mile-an-hour speed limit over all periods of the day. Whilst the red tarmac overlaid with hatch markings does dissuade motorists from deviating from their line, this is permitted as a manoeuvre for drivers when it's safe and legal to do so when they need to pass a cyclist. The introduction of the scheme has supported the safety of cyclists by reducing the speed of traffic and the occurrence of only one pedal cyclist collision since the scheme was introduced is testament to the success of the measures on this busy local distributor road that carries over 8,000 vehicles every day. That, I believe, is 1 in 10 years. Central hatched road markings is a recognised form of traffic calming used to discourage drivers from overtaking, which can give the impression that the road is narrower than it is in reality. Placing them on a coloured black background can give additional emphasis. As the road is wide enough and given the ability for drivers to pass cyclists safely, officers have considered it appropriate when designing the existing scheme to provide narrower lane widths in which there have been no reported safety issues.
Councillor Humphreys, I'm sure you've got a supplementary.
Of course. I think this just highlights the ongoing problem there is with no one with cycling experience in the highways department. I've ridden that road many times, and all it's done is increase the speed for certain motorists who, in an attempt to get past, will sort of speed up to get to the islands or just avoid them altogether by going on the other side of the road. It's made it considerably more dangerous. And as with all the other bizarre cycling schemes, such as the cycle path that morphs into a sand pit, the cycle lanes 2 and 3 metres long, can you actually commit to employing a proper experienced cyclist who can review all these desktop tick box exercising projects and produce a report to improve safety for all road users?
You're completely incorrect, Mr. Humphreys. There are several very experienced and very keen cyclists in the Highways Department, and they are actively involved in designing these roads. Could
you put me in touch with them, please? Because this doesn't happen.
Excuse me, Mr. Humphrey. you've made your point. Thank you. Can I now call on Councillor Hinton to, Daniel Hinton, to ask his question of Perry Bath.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Wokingham is a safe and healthy place to live. I'm convinced that the borough's good health that's recently been reported on is in no small measure due to the sporting facilities the councils offer our residents. Could you please explain your plans for the sports facilities within the borough, both already in place and in progress, stating the cost for these sports facilities? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hinton. And I totally agree with you. We need to keep our residents very healthy. As part of our new draft leisure strategy 2021 to 2025, currently out for public consultation, current plans that are in place for new facilities are redevelopment of the Carnival Pool, 23 million, 3G pitch Arborfield Primary School, 800k, Cantley Park enhancement, 2.2 million, Cantley Park play area, 300k, new facilities that have recently had executive approval and plans are now in place for a new boxing fitness hub, 630,000, Laurel Park 3D pitch, 300,000 plus 500,000 coming from the Football Association. These investments are part of our ongoing commitment to leisure, enhancing the well-being opportunities for the borough residents and ensuring Woking Borough remains one of the healthiest and the best place to live. Other investments in facilities which leisure area that have been completed are parking and toilet facilities at California Park, 2.1 million, network of greenways, including attractive walking and cycling routes, 320,000, new activity centre at Dinton, 1.8 million, new outdoor play area at California, 300,000. Investments completed within the sports facilities are Bulmush Leisure Centre, 14.5 million, Ryesh Green and Arborfield Leisure Centre, leisure facilities, 4.9 million, Loddon Valley Leisure Centre refurbished, 2.2 million. So it amounts about just over 53 million pounds of investment, which is a very heavy investment that we've invested in our excellent facilities, sports facilities, keep our health, our borough residents very healthy. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bath. Do you have a supplementary, Mr. Hinton?
I don't, but thank you very much.
Thank you. Now over to Mrs. Lissman. Good to see you again after many, many months. Welcome back.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is, I chair a small group who are looking to improve a local open space. We are aware the council receives SIL, Community Infrastructure Levy, money in respect of new developments within the borough to fund improvements to roads, transport, schools, leisure centres, open spaces and so on. How can our group find out how much of this SIL money remains unallocated in our area and what is the process for bidding for this funding?
Councillor Smith.
Evening, Jenny. The Community Infrastructure Levy is fully committed on infrastructure schemes related to developments that were funded by the medium-term financial plan for the next 10 years. Some town and parish councils, i.e. relevant to that section, do receive a portion of SIL, and you might wish to make inquiries with them. If, however, you have specific proposal to improve a local open space facility, I recommend that you discuss your ideas with the appropriate team, the green and blue infrastructure team in the council, and they will provide you with advice on alternative funding solutions, and they will be able to assist in setting up your proposals and work with you in more details. That was before I spoke to you this evening. I will take it on board tomorrow and speak to Fran Hobson, because I'm with her at 12 o'clock, and take on board, because you know we've got a big tree planting scheme that we've got to find places for 250,000 trees. So that might be a great solution. But if it's a case of landscaping, I'm sure that somebody at the borough can help you.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Jenny, do you have a supplementary?
I'm not sure now. I think maybe I'll just leave it and hope to speak to Fran again. Although it does seem to take an awful lot of effort to contact Woking Borough Council officers and get speedy responses. Fran has been very good, but Maybe others are not quite so ready or helpful. Sorry.
No, it's okay. Well, I'll speak to her tomorrow. We've got your email addresses, so I'll get her to give you a buzz or even meet you on site. I know where you're talking about, so I'll speak to her.
Jenny, you're free to go, but if you want to stay, I'm afraid I'm going to have to ask you to move up to the, sorry. But good to see you. Helen Palmer, is she here on virtual? Helen Palmer?
Yes, I am. Can you hear
Okay.
me?
Yes, we can. Please go ahead.
Yes, good. 2 years ago, Wokingham District Council voted unanimously to declare a climate emergency. It was a momentous occasion. Firstly, may I thank everyone involved in this. Cutting greenhouse gas emissions to net zero by 2030 in Wokingham is a formidable task. However, the Council has committed to it. Next, I would like to quote from the report and recommendations of the Council's Overview and Scrutiny Management Committee's Climate Emergency Task and Finish Group of June 2021. In light of the Government's target of achieving net zero by 2050, we sought views on the feasibility of the Council's 2030 target. It was suggested that achieving net zero by 2030 was the safest way to restrict global warming to the Paris target of 1.5 degrees. However, 2030 was only 8 years away and the task facing us was enormous. Net zero by 2030 was technically feasible, but was unlikely to be politically or financially feasible. Instead, we should focus on making significant progress by the mid-2020s. My question is, can the Council assure me of its commitment to achieving net zero by 2030? Significant progress by the mid-2030s is not specific enough, it's not soon enough, and it's quite simply not good enough.
Well, thank you for your question, Helen, and it's good to see you again. There are two things that I would say in response to your question. The first is that the Climate Emergency Task and Finish Group report presents the recommendations made following scrutiny of the Climate Emergency Action Plan. The group acts as a critical friend to the Council, its officers and myself, and the Council can choose to accept or not their recommendations. The report you refer to is the recommendations of that group and not necessarily Council policy. The second thing to say is that Woking Borough Council made a commitment to play as full a role as possible, leading by example as well as exhortation in achieving a carbon neutral Woking Borough by 2030. The Council stands by this and is taking this commitment through developing clear and ambitious climate emergency action plan that sets the borough well on the path towards net zero. The action plan has included a number of major commitments, such as the delivery of solar farms, planting 250,000 trees, and developing a net zero local plan, amongst many others. Since the Council's declaration to tackle the climate emergency, the extensive planning and strategy development phases of the Climate Emergency Action Plan have been undertaken, and we're already starting to see the results of that work, with the first solar farm at the planning application stage and the Dinton Activity Centre nearing completion as a new net zero council development. The Council's own actions, along with its statutory powers and responsibilities, are important levers to reduce the emissions in the borough, but these powers are limited. And we need to look at a wider picture where our role as a community leader and influencer will be equally, if not more so, critical. To reach net zero across the suite of sectors and activities that we cannot directly control, we require partnerships and collaboration as a vital ingredient of success. More than half the emissions cuts needed rely on people and businesses taking up low carbon solutions, decisions that are made locally and at an individual level. Many of these decisions can be positively influenced by having supporting infrastructure and systems in place.
I'm sorry, you've run out of time, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr.
Sorry. Helen, do you have a supplementary? No, that was the supplementary. Apologies.
It wasn't the supplementary.
It wasn't, so I got it right in the first place. Do you have a supplementary for Councillor Murray?
Yes, I thank you very much for that answer, and I have seen the plan. I just wondered whether the Council had You've already answered part of my supplementary, so I'm a bit flustered. But I wondered how you were planning to get people on board with these significant changes in our habits and behaviour that the citizens of Wokingham need to make.
That's a really fantastic question, and actually is something that we're going to be talking about slightly later on in this meeting. Behaviour change is the single most important thing that we can do as a council, as individuals, as organisations to combat climate change. I'm highly aware of that. When we came back into this new session of council this year, I switched the focus of the council's officers from doing the strategic development phase of our climate emergency action plan and making behaviour change our #1 priority and our #1 focus. I've developed 8 areas that I want the council to focus our attention on. I want us to work with big organisations and small organisations and charities and religious groups and schools and everybody that we possibly can, and use our role as a community influencer to bring people together and then use that opportunity to drive the behaviour change. Because we can't do it at 1 or 2 people at a time. The problem is too big. We've got to start thinking bigger. We've got to start bringing organisations together, and we've got to set a very, very clear plan with WBC right in the very centre of it.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. And thank you, Mrs. Palmer, for your questions.
Thank you.
I believe that we have Mike Smith on the line. Can you ask your question, please, now?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Following Councillor Halsall's comments at the last executive meeting on the 24th of June, and widely reported in the press about early Wokingham Town Councils not contributing to COVID activities, as an early town council, I consider the statement both ill-informed, inaccurate, and also offensive to the hard-working senior officers who have been at their posts throughout. Please could the lead on finance tell me exactly how much of the 9.35 million of additional COVID funding received by WBC from central government was forwarded to any of the town and parish councillors within Wokingham to assist with their massive reduction in income due to the facility being closed down and the additional costs of dealing and operating with COVID throughout due to COVID restrictions, including ETC's offices being in use continuously. A short answer is all I require. Thank you.
Councillor Kaiser, would you like to answer that, please?
I'm taking that, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Smith. The context of my reply was to some preposterous questions posed around the money we have in our budget for our recovery strategy. Clearly, organisations target all the existing resources where appropriate towards what is most important and include necessary additional budgets to their financial plans, which we did. This is a far more robust and meaningful approach to recovery, as opposed to putting up some lines of bunting from symbolic effect. Last year, all town and parish councils received their full precept from WBC as a collection authority. This will be the same this year. Alas, we do not have the luxury of such security around our primary source of income. Any shortfall in income for the towns and parishes would be from their traded and retail activities. Provided they met the criteria specified by central government, they would be eligible for appropriate rate relief and the retail grants that this council paid out on behalf of central government. Over £166,500 was successfully claimed and paid out to towns and parish councils, of which Early Town Council claimed nearly £18,000. Regarding the 9.35 million, whilst this money was gratefully received, WBC received the lowest amount per head of any unitary authority. This was insufficient to cover the impact of COVID and the needs of our residents. The executive had to pass a supplementary estimate during the last financial year to use its own funds to meet additional pressures arising from the pandemic. This included getting rough sleepers off the streets, supporting survivors of domestic abuse into safe accommodation, supporting the shielding programme for clinically vulnerable people. It also included aspects of the death management process, such as body storage, public funerals and crematoria. Importantly, it meant this council continued to provide vital services to residents, including adult social care and children's services.
Councillor Halsall, your time is up. Thank you. Mr. Smith, I'm sure you've got a supplementary.
I do, thank you. According to the Early Town Clerk, we received £8,906 in additional monies direct from WBC. That's 1/1000th of the funding you received from central government. And I would say that I think they coped admirably with the unplanned 25% loss of income from their commercial activities and still produced a positive bottom line. They kept their help shop open and they've not delegated any decisions to officers. And the material activities have included replacing their out-of-date finance systems and IT systems, as well as enhancing the green spaces, which have been so important for mental health over the last 15 or so months. So really my question, which was
question, Mr. Smith, can you've got 15 seconds left. Can you get to your question, please?
Yes, my question is actually aimed at Councillor Kaiser, not Councillor Halsall, was would you agree that Early Town Council has not been asleep for the last 16 months as claimed?
Councillor Halsall.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, interestingly enough, your returns suggest that your reserves went up by £300,000 last year. You did receive £18,000. The question...
The figure the clerk told me today.
Mr. Smith, can you please not interject? Thank you.
Sorry.
Carry on, Mr. Halsall. Councillor Halsall.
Thank you, sir. The question and a similar one from your leader were informed and extremely offensive to the officers and members of the Borough Council who've worked very hard to keep residents safe during the pandemic. I think you should apologise to them, our officers, Mr. Smith.
Thank you. I'm sure this will run and run. Thank you for your question, Mr. Smith. I think we've got one more. Time for one more. Yes. Louise Timlin. Are you here? Yes, good. Please ask your question.
Thank you. I wanted to ask, so Berkshire Women's Aid and Kaleidoscopic, two well-known specialist local charities, recently lost the bid to provide domestic abuse services to Wokingham Borough, despite a strong track record in supporting victims over the years. The organisation Cransdown has been awarded the tender. Please could you detail their experience and track record of success in providing services to victims of domestic abuse?
Councillor Smith.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your question, Louise. Dealing with incidents of domestic abuse is taken extremely seriously by the council. With increased demand on services in this area, council funding for this contract has been significantly increased. Arrangements being made by the council to bring public protection back under the sole control of this borough is a major step towards ensuring cases such as domestic abuse can be dealt with both efficiently and promptly. I can assure you that the awarding of the contract to Cranston, which started on July the 1st, was robustly processed, and the decision made follows a scrupulous examination to the services to be offered.
Right. Ms. Timlin, I'm sure you've got a supplementary.
So that did not answer my question whatsoever. So I really would like at some point to have a full and specific answer to that question. However, I'd also like to know, Cranstown don't currently have a refuge in Wokingham for victims of domestic abuse. Fortunately, Berkshire Women's Aid are continuing to provide refuge services. But can you tell me when Cranstown will start to provide refuge services in Wokingham?
Thank you very much. Can I just first of all explain that at the time this contract was awarded, I was not in the post that I'm in, and therefore to be able to answer your question honestly and factfully, I will need to come back to you with a written answer. I'm sorry about that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. That's the end of our public question time. I would appreciate all the non-councillors who are on virtual, if it's possible that they could leave to give greater bandwidth to the councillors to carry out the work. Thank you very much. So we now move on to item 21, which is petitions. I believe we have 3 petitions lined up. I'll start off with Councillor Margetts. You've got 3 minutes to summarise your petition. Please, can those who have petitions just leave them there and they will be collected up at the end of the meeting. Okay, thank you. Councillor Margetts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to present this petition to the council tonight on behalf of my residents. The petition, which has been signed by 1,325 residents, calls for WBC to work with Bow Hunt Educational Trust towards providing sixth form provision in the south of Wokingham. There's currently no sixth form facility at all in the south of Wokingham. Residents from Finch Hampstead are faced with the journey to Farnborough College or a trip across Wokingham for sixth form education. I don't believe this is right. The 1,325 people who signed this petition also don't believe it's right. This petition follows another one last year with 1,700 signatures. The public are speaking and making their voice clear. There are many reasons to progress a sixth form in the south. There's been increased house building to the south of Wokingham for the last 10 years. The local population has grown and will continue to expand in current years. If houses are built, we need the services to support them. WBC's own figures predict year 11 at Bow Hunt will grow from 181 children to 307 in the next 5 years. Where are these children meant to go to sixth form? WBC declared a climate emergency 2 years ago. A significant contributor to the climate crisis is vehicle emissions. This situation is creating long journeys by car because there are minimal public transport options every day to get to a sixth form. These journeys would not be needed if there was a local facility. Roads around Finch Hampstead are already congested at rush hour. It's not unusual to be in stationary traffic down the Finch Hampstead Road every morning. It can take 30 to 45 minutes to drive to Embrook and the Forest. When I talk to my residents, one of their biggest bugbears is congestion. Development of a local sixth form would remove the need for many rush hour journeys by car and bus. 181 pupils left Bow Hunt Wokingham this year when they turned 16. 15 applied for places in Wokingham schools and 7 of those were told there were none available. There's no capacity in Wokingham to absorb these new residents in the south of the borough. 160 of them went to Farnborough College because there's no local provision. Bow Hunt Educational Trust is keen to expand its successful operation at Bow Hunt in Wokingham. They've designed a sixth form curriculum which would compete with Farnborough College and would provide a high quality local facility for residents. I'd ask my colleagues within WBC to get round the table with Bow Hunt Educational Trust, work towards finding funding for this proposal and help to achieve a sixth form to the south of the borough as quickly as possible. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you for being short and brief. Councillor Sloan, I believe you have a petition.
Thank you very much. This petition is presented by Mr. Brian Mooney and neighbours who are living in Coleman's-Moor Road, Woodley. The petition is signed by 54 residents from the even numbers 22 to 110 and the odd numbers from 17 to 93. The petition calls for Wokingham Borough Council to make what was a temporary parking restriction permanent. Alterations to an entrance to Dinton Pastures located in Coleman's-Moor Road were made to improve pedestrian access and to include a new cycleway. This has increased the usage and parking in Coleman's-Moor Road to a degree that is both difficult and potentially dangerous. Coleman's-Moor Road is a busy route serving a large residential area and is a through route from Loddon Bridge Road to the Barder Way, which will eventually lead to the A329M. It's also a bus route for buses 13 and 14, which are both double-decker. Negotiating these parked cars allows for only one vehicle through, and as you can imagine, this is particularly frustrating and difficult when a bus is approaching. The residents who have signed this petition have the benefit of off-road parking, but have great difficulty exiting their property between parked vehicles and pose a danger to themselves and oncoming vehicles when doing so. The installation of a permanent parking restriction will not only greatly reduce the potential of a traffic or pedestrian action, but will also improve the journey of our bus passengers. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sloan. I think we've got one other. Would you like to do your 3 minutes, please? Thank you.
I would like to present a petition to improve bus service provision for Evandens East and Westcott West school children, asking the council to commission additional school bus transport for secondary school children living along the Finch Hampstead Road corridor. That would ensure that there is a school bus place for every child that wishes to have one, and the additional transport would be routed along Finch Hampstead Road. Currently, there is inadequate school bus provision only to St Crispin's along Finch Hampstead Road, which may be oversubscribed. And children who are increasingly having to attend Embrook rather than St Crispin's, because St Crispin's places are being taken by Montague Park, they have to get to a bus stop in Finch Hampstead on Barkham Ride or on Barkham Road, which is quite difficult. Walking and cycling facilities are poor, with narrow pavements, a heavily used day road, no segregated cycle lanes. Safe green transport needs to be readily available for the children. The absence of that will result in increased car use, with emissions growth running counter to the council's declared climate emergency. We have 201 signatures, of which 58 are on the electronic version, and the remainder are on paper, which has been delivered, I believe, already this week.
Thank you very much, Councillor Shenton. So we're now moving on to agenda item 22, and the items 22 to 29, just to remind you that they have a 30-minute limit according to rule 4.2.2.1. 30 minutes, and I will again stop the debate after 30 minutes and we'll move straight to the vote. So the first item is holding of full council meetings or remote attendance. Do we have a proposer?
It is I, sir.
Thank you, John. Do you have a seconder?
I do.
Second, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, we've got a seconder. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have an amendment. I certainly can. Thank you.
Councillor Holsall, would you introduce this proposal, please?
Thank you, sir. The case rate within Wokingham is currently 350 per 100,000. The daily case numbers have doubled from Monday 12th July to Monday 19th July, which means the case rate within Wokingham is expected to double over the next week and continue rising from there, probably to an excess of 700. Most cases are in younger, or singly vaccinated people, but the increasing case numbers are now reflecting a case rate rise in people over 60 years old. Vaccination of 2 doses has reduced the chance of a person catching COVID, but has not removed that risk. Double the vaccinated people can both get COVID and, importantly, transmit COVID to others. The transmission risk of COVID has not changed. The virus is transmitted and caught by aerosols spreading in the air. The same mitigations remain effective, including distancing, hand hygiene, mask wearing, and good ventilation. Government policy has shifted this week to allow people to make personal choices which affect their own risk, but also the risk of those around them. The overwhelming message from central government is to proceed cautiously and carefully over the coming months. The government also expects and recommends that people wear face coverings in crowded indoor places. We as a council are sticking to those guidelines. It is in that context that we were faced with the meetings of the council. The choices were to cancel full council, move it to a huge hall, or do what we are doing. We decided to do the latter, as it is the best of the range of choices. Sadly, it does not tick all the boxes, but I recommend you look at our neighbours. The norm is to have suspended meetings since February 2020 in favour of delegating to the chief executive decision-making, which means motions, questions and petitions are not heard. Many parish councils and towns in the boroughs are still doing that. We have restarted all our meetings as soon as possible, albeit with some curtailment. I do not believe that there will be a material change for a long time. I'm asking you to agree to this for the remainder of the calendar year, with the proviso that we return to full council meetings as soon as possible. Passing this motion also means that for 6 months attendance rules, any member joining the meeting remotely will be deemed to have been present. Again, I propose we agree to this for the rest of the calendar year. I commend this to the council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Howson. Councillor Bowring, do you want to speak now or reserve?
Reserve my right, please, Mr. Mayor.
Right, thank you. Councillor Jones.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have an amendment which I believe Democratic Services have, so we would like it passed amongst councillors present in the chamber. Thank you.
While this is being distributed. I'll just remind all councillors the process. We'll get a seconder for the amendment, which I see is Councillor Conway. It's old age, I'm afraid. It's getting to me. And we'll then debate that. Then the proposer of the original motion can respond to the amendment. We'll go to the vote. And if it's voted through, it'll become a substantive motion. If it's not, we'll revert back to the original motion. I think everyone's through now. And it's also on the screen as well. Thank you. Over to you, Councillor Jones.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I'm proposing a minor amendment to recommendation 1. Prue Bray was going to be the proposer, but as it will become clear, she is not allowed to be. This is a speech that she would have made. The government has refused to allow councils to continue with virtual meetings. This gives us a bit of a problem with regard to full council. The issue is not general participation. We have arrangements in place which allow everyone to participate remotely. It isn't quite the same as being present in person, but it is a way of joining in the meeting for those who are self-isolating or clinically vulnerable or who cannot fit in the council chamber if we were to maintain social distancing. But virtual attendance does not permit a councillor to vote or apparently to propose or second anything, hence someone else having to make this speech. We don't know how long this state of affairs will last. We cannot go on for months and months with only half of the councillors able to propose or second motions or to vote at a full council meeting. We need to find a solution. Other councils have decided to meet in large venues instead of their council chamber. Going somewhere else costs money. We would prefer it if we could find a way to make it work without spending money. We have some ideas which involve different ways of using this building. We will be happy to discuss them again with all the other groups and officers to see if between us we can come up with a solution that will allow everyone to speak and vote without having to make any compromises on public health advice. Some of these ideas have been put forward to the council's leadership. But if we agree to the recommendations laid out in the agenda, we will be committing ourselves to holding meetings only in the council chamber until Christmas. That's why I am proposing an amendment. It's a pretty simple one to delete the words in the council chamber at shoot end from recommendation 1. It leaves in place a commitment to stick to public health advice. It doesn't propose we move somewhere else. It just takes out the restriction that binds us to one option for the next 6 months. We want everyone to be safe. We also want all councillors to be able to participate fully and vote at council meetings. I would ask you, please, in the interests of democracy, support this amendment. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Councillor Conway, would you like to speak now, please?
May I reserve my right, Mr. Mayor?
Okay. So is there anyone, just need to check, that wants to speak against this amendment? Okay, so we are going to go through the normal process. Can you just put your hands up first in the chamber? Those who want to speak on this motion, either for or against, please, and we'll record that. And then I will go to the virtual group to record them, and then we'll take them in sequence. So please, can you put your hands up, please, in the, so. Yeah. John, just clarity while we're taking the names. You have a right of reply to this, and according to Constitution, that is your opportunity to speak at the end.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. We've got all the hands from inside the chamber. Now I'm going to go to the virtual. I can see Councillor Cowan. Is there anybody else? I'm just checking. Last call for anyone else there. So we're going to start off with Councillor Cowan, please.
Thank you, Keith. Well, I assume you can hear me. Hello, can you hear me?
We can.
Sorry, my apologies. I do understand the difficulty this is causing, and there probably really isn't a quick fix from either process. John, I understand the point that John's made, but it does raise some points. My concern was, I believe the council has probably done its very best to hire premises that would enable us to conduct proper meetings. And when the pandemic was at its peak, remote meetings made sense, and to some extent they still do. But removing attendance means you cannot vote is the part I'm actually most uncomfortable with, as with in the council chamber only. I expect the government rules and regs that are influencing this, but I wonder, are we asking the government if they will relax the rules in this area? I do hope we are. So if I was able to vote, which obviously I can't, I would be supportive of the amendment, because I think it moves John's proposal forward just a little bit and makes it slightly easier for members who don't attend the meeting to be comfortable with. Thank you, Keith.
Thank you, Councillor Cohen. Councillor Conway, since no one else other than John wants to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The right to vote, I hope everyone agrees, is fundamental to democracy. Our ancestors fought hard for that right, and it should not be given up lightly, even if on a temporary basis, and even in special circumstances. This amendment seeks to enable all councillors to vote in future council meetings. As social distancing is still strongly advised, despite the ending of the legal requirement last Monday, the council chamber alone is not sufficient to accommodate all those who wish to participate. At the annual council meeting and now at this meeting, the number of councillors able to attend and vote has been limited, a situation which I hope no one wishes to be repeated in future meetings. It might be worth reminding executive members that non-executive councillors of all political groups are not second-class councillors. All non-executive councillors have an important role in holding the executive to account and, of course, in representing their wards. They can carry out their duties fully only if they're able to attend council meetings and exercise their right to propose and second motions and to vote. The amendment does not require the council to find alternative venues. That's a really important point. It does not require the council to find alternative venues, but it does provide an opportunity for the council to come up with more creative ways of using the council offices to enable all councillors to have the opportunity to attend full council meetings and participate in decision making through voting. I urge those councillors who can vote this evening to affirm their support for democracy by supporting this amendment. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Conway. Councillor Halsall, your right of reply, and then we go to the vote.
This council has been the forefront of democracy, Mr. Conway. It has restarted meetings as soon as it was possible. Unlike a number of our towns and parish councils who delegated to officers. We've spent a lot of this year trying to find the options which are available to us. We did consider the option of extending the council chamber to the whole of the shoot end. We took legal advice on it, and your leader and deputy leader know that the legal advice that we took suggested that we could not extend the premises to the whole of the shoot end. So the options that are available to us, and we've extensively researched those, is to cancel the meetings. We don't have to hold council meetings. None of the business that we're doing in the council meeting is a budget or an annual council meeting. The other option is to hold hire a huge hall with everybody with a microphone. This would be the size of a third of a football pitch. The chairing of that would be very, very difficult. It would be quite expensive, both in officer time and in cost. The third option is to doing what we're doing at the moment. My motion is intended to give some certainty to the next 6 months. We only can hold these meetings if we agree or we've passed the motion in council to hold these meetings. So I would urge people to vote against the amendment. My motion is certainty. It means that we know what we're doing for the next 6 months, and we know the parameters on which we were doing it. The fail-safes are that the group leaders can call a leaders meeting to discuss the arrangements, and if we agree to change the arrangements, then so be it. But my motion gives certainty for the next 6 months. Your motion, your amendment gives uncertainty. So I would urge to vote down the amendment. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Also, message from Madeline. Can you stop screen sharing, please? Thank you. Magic of technology. Yeah? Right. So we're now going to the vote for the amendment. All those in favour of the amendment, please show by the raising of hands. The amendment, this is those in favour of the amendment. Okay, hands down, please. Those against the amendment, please raise your hands. You got? You okay? Right. And you can take your hands down. Those abstaining, please raise their hands. Right. Waiting for the tally. The amendment has been voted for, so it becomes the substantive motion. Do you need me to read out the motion or can we move on? Thank you. Right, so we're back to the substantive motion and the amended motion, which is now the substantive motion. Can I have a hands up for those who wish to speak on the amended motion now? Nope. Okay, so I propose we're going to go straight to the vote. Right. All those in favour, please put your hands up. Hands down, please. Those against the motion. Don't see any hands. Those abstaining, please raise your hand. So that motion has been carried. Thank you very much. So we now move on to item 23, the Armed Forces Covenant, proposed by, or do we have a proposer? Thank you. And
yes, seconder, yes.
And you're the seconder. Councillor Ross, would you like to propose the motion, please? But the item.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm proud to have served in our armed forces, albeit many years ago, and also now to serve as the Council's Armed Forces Champion. Over the 40 years since I left the RAF, the attention paid by the public to those serving in our forces and the help given to veterans has increased enormously. By the way, a veteran is anyone who has served in Her Majesty's forces for 1 day or more. The role of the various agencies and charities in this sector is wide, but responsibilities also fall on local councils. Whilst we were quick to adopt the Armed Forces Covenant back in 2013, we have not followed up to support service families and veterans as extensively as some other councils. What is proposed today is that we all recommit this council, and that's every one of us, and our own endeavours to extend our support for the armed forces community, that is those serving and veterans and their families, recognising the sacrifices faced by those people. The report identifies a surprising number so far identified of serving and veteran personnel in our borough, and even numbers for each ward. It's recognised that many forces personnel have difficulty in adjusting back to civilian life when they finish their service. Providing advice and also assisting in gaining civilian employment and finding individuals' transferable skills are areas where councils can help. One incentive for councils to provide this help is the Employers Recognition Scheme. To achieve bronze, silver, and hopefully gold awards, we need to demonstrate or advocate support to those ex-service personnel aligning our values with the Covenant. Many councils and authorities have already achieved these stages of recognition, including the Royal Berkshire Fire and Rescue Service, who gained their Gold Award last year. I trust we will receive the first level of bronze soon. Work has already begun by our officers. Further support within Berkshire will come from the newly formed Royal Berkshire Civilian Military Partnership Board. This will assist those councils less well advanced with their policies and practices by working with those more advanced. In addition, joint applications for many funding sources now available can assist all Berkshire councils. The WCBC website now has a section support for armed forces families with links to supporting departments and agencies. I propose the recommendations in our agenda to reaffirm this council's commitment to the Armed Forces Covenant and to support our recently increased involvement with and support for those serving and veteran families in our borough. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Ross. Councillor Halsall, do you want to speak now or reserve your right?
I'll reserve mine.
Okay. Normally at this stage, I would ask if anybody wants to speak against the motion, but I'm sure nobody's going to do that. So I'm going to do the Mayor's prerogative because I know there is one colleague who would like to speak from the opposition bench, and I'm sure she's going to be speaking for. So please go ahead.
I would like to speak for this motion. I'm speaking for the group because I'm the only one who served in the armed forces, even if it was on the other side of the pond. It is the equivalent. What is interesting to note is both my father and stepfather served in the forces, but none of my brothers nor my sisters served. I was the only one of my generation to do so. Looking at the rest of the council, I also see very few have also served. We need to honor all those who've served for Queen and country. On the other side of the pond as well, they tell people in uniform, thank you for your service. What they don't say is for putting your life on the line to keep me safe. We really should honor those serving in the police and fire authorities as well, because they are also putting their lives on the line to keep us safe. We should also honor those who serve in other allied forces in other countries, as well as willing to give their lives to save others. Thank you.
Thank you for those words. I see on Teams, Councillor Cohen would like to speak. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Like Councillor Ross, I'm an ex-member of the Royal Air Force also, and if I had the opportunity to vote to support this covenant, I would be there like a shot. But unfortunately, the system doesn't allow me to do it. Not the system's fault, but it has my full support, and thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cowan, for your kind words. Councillor Duran.
Thank you very much, and I'll make a third Royal Air Force veteran speaking. Yes, not from across the pond. Yes, I'd be brief. Just want to say you won't be surprised here, I'm fully in favour of this. And I was going to make 2 points, one of which there didn't seem to be much done since we went for the covenant in 2013, but Councillor Ross covered that off, and that's just one of those things. Obviously, there's a lot of veterans still here, a lot of service people still here. I really support the idea of this bronze status employer recognition scheme. I know the requirements are pretty minimal, and effectively we just haven't gone for it since it started. Really, that's the only thing that was lacking. And the requirements of silver status don't appear to be that difficult either. So I hope we're going to move forward to that pretty soon. So yeah, great thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Durand. Councillor Sun.
Thank you very much, Mayor. When this was signed in 2013, I signed on behalf of Woodley Town Council in favour of this, and I'm wondering whether we could encourage the towns and parishes who signed previously to again restate their commitment to it.
Thank you, Councillor Sun. I think we've got representatives or senior representatives of all three town councils, so I'm sure they will take away that message to the respective town councils and parish councils as well. So I don't see any other people wishing to speak. John, you wanted to reserve your right?
Really, much of it has been said. So just to reiterate, the covenant describes the transaction where the nation provides support to the armed forces and those who have served it previously, together with their families, in return for which it expects to be defended at the cost of personal liberty and even life. It's a voluntary statement of mutual support between the civilian community and its local armed forces community, and I recommend it.
Thank you, Councillor Holsall. And we're going to move to the vote. Oh, sorry. Back to Angus. That's why we have officers, to keep me honest.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No, I've nothing to add, but I do thank Councillor Stone for reminding us about the links for support also from our towns and parish councils, and perhaps we could ask officers to pass on what we've done to those so they can take that up. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we'll move on to the vote. And whilst the Mayor is normally neutral, I feel sufficiently strong enough, I will be voting for this report myself. All those in favour, please show. Okay. Just for the record, all those against, please show. No, all those abstaining, please show. That's unanimous, and thank you very, very much. So we now move on to the next item, which is the annual pay policy statement. Do we have a proposer? John, thank you. Do we have a seconder?
Mr. Mayor.
I'm just looking. Sorry, I'm just checking on the Teams. Well, Teams can't do that. Councillor, we've got seconder. Sorry. Oh, Councillor Bowring. Okay, thank you. John, would you like to introduce this subject, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm delighted to propose the annual pay policy for the council. This is a process required by the Localism Act 2011. I've been very proud to be the leader of the council during the last 2.5 years, particularly during the pandemic, when the importance of staff was paramount. I can say that all our staff stepped up to the plate in a way which none of us could have expected. Some have exceeded all expectations and are noticeably tired consequently. I hope that the good weather persists as batteries need recharging, as we have a full and exciting programme in front of us. We are the best local authority in the land in many respects, the healthiest and most prosperous. We are also the least deprived and therefore the lowest funded. There are many achievements that we aspire to. Playing our part in achieving climate neutrality, keeping the council financially secure, improving air quality, increasing biodiversity, Ofsted good and excellent, defeating poverty and prejudice, championing equality, increasing mobility, easing loneliness and easing mental health, improving all the lives of our residents and reducing congestions, right homes in the right place and many more. We can only do this with the best and most committed officers. Therefore, our pay policies call to the ambition. We want our officers to feel the Woking Borough is the best place to work and to make a career. So our objective is to ensure that in future years, our pay and personal problem policies are attuned to that aim. I recommend this policy to the council.
Thank you, Councillor Holso. Councillor Bowring, do you want to speak now or reserve the right?
Reserve my right, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Excuse me. All those who wish to speak on this report, please put your hand up. Can't see anybody there. We've got Rachel Burgess on virtual. Is there anybody else? Right, so straight over to you, Councillor Burgess.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Once again, I'm sorry to see that there's no mention of the gender pay gap in this report. The gender pay gap is not even referenced as a relevant document. So it's not a legal requirement, but the guidance under which this document was prepared, which is referenced at section 1.3, does make reference to the gender pay gap, and specifically that the council should ensure that the council's pay structures are not discriminatory and encourages organisations to make information public relating to workforce gender profiles and aspects of pay. Since last year, the mean gender pay gap at WBC has increased to 15.6%. This is worse than the latest data available for the local authority average, and it's 11% worse than neighbouring Reading Borough Council's gap, which comes in at 4.71%. The median gender pay gap between men and women is even worse at 17.3% compared to Reading's 2.5%. It's not acceptable that average pay for men and women in this council for men is over 15% higher than the average pay for women. The only way to resolve such a gender pay gap is to proactively put measures in place to close it. These are exactly the kind of measures as referenced in the LGA guidance, which should be detailed in the council's pay policy. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Burgess. Just do one last sweep. Anybody wishing to speak? Either on Teams or otherwise. Okay. Councillor Bowring, do you want to do your speech now, please?
I have nothing to add to what Councillor Holsall said, and I fully support this proposal.
Thank you. So we'll go to the, sorry, Councillor Holsall, you have a right of reply.
Thank you. Just addressing the points that Councillor Burgess has raised. We do a separate report on gender pay policy, and it goes through the Personnel Board every year. We have a particular demographic differences between us and Reading. They employ a lot more of their direct workers directly. We have much more office staff based. So there are differences which make the comparisons really invalid. But the points taken, I commend the pay policy to the council.
Thank you, Councillor Holsall. So we'll go to the vote. All those in favour of what's in front of you, please raise your hands. Okay, hands down now, please. All those against, please raise their hands. Don't see anyone. And anyone abstaining, please raise your hand. So the report has been carried and the recommendation is carried. Thank you very much. Moving on to item 25, Member Code of Conduct. Do we have a proposer for this? Councillor Holsall, do you have a seconder? Councillor Holsall, do you have a seconder? Okay. Right. Councillor Holsall, will you like to introduce the report, please?
Well, first of all, I'd like to apologise for the chairman of the Standards Board who can't be here tonight for COVID reasons. So I'm presenting this on his behalf. On the 29th of December, the local government, 2020, the Local Government Association published a model code of conduct the model code, all councils are required to adopt a local councillor code of conduct, and the model code is provided for use by council as a template to adopt in whole or with local amendments should they wish to. It is the role of the Standards Committee to determine whether to recommend the model code amended or otherwise to full council for inclusion in the council's constitution. The Standards Committee considered the model code at its meeting on the 8th of March 2020 and agreed to recommend the code to the council subject to the following amendments. The addition of an appendix of a guidance to the social media, when dealing with respect the obligation for councillors to notify rather than report concerns to the local authority, the retention of the current level of registration threshold at £25 for gifts and hospitality, an amendment to the section on exempt and confidential information for councillors to seek advice from the monitoring officer before releasing any paper which is marked or could reasonably be assumed to be confidential exempt. The model code of conduct is set out at Annex A with highlighted amendments as agreed by the Standards Committee. The Council is recommended to adopt for inclusion in the Constitution the LGA's Model Code of Conduct as amended by the Standards Committee at its meeting of the 8th of March 2020, attached at an Annex A to the report, subject to paragraph 2, which can be found on page 70 of the agenda, being deleted from the document. The guidance on the use of social media by councillors attached to appendix Annex A to the report. And that's all I have to say, sir.
Thank you. I understand that there is an amendment. Yes. Councillor Halsall, we've been handed the potential amendments. Could you clarify?
I've incorporated that with a recommendation.
Okay, is that all right? Okay, I need to check. The Constitution says the proposer can recommend an amendment subject to the agreement of the seconder. And I'm looking at the seconder. Do you agree to that amendment, the amendment you've got in front of you?
Mr. Mayor, we're happy with Councillor Halsall's amendment to his own motion.
Right, so that then becomes a substantive. So we're now, who wants to? Yeah, I've been asked to remind you, you've got copies of the amendment on your desk in front of you, amongst all the other papers. So hands up those who wish to speak on the new substantive motion. Hands up for anybody? No. Anybody on the Teams? I've got Councillor Ferris. Nobody else. Councillor Ferris, please make your statement.
Thank you. For someone who's on Teams, I'm a little confused. John did mention withdrawal of para 2. We're looking at the withdrawal of section 4.2, and I'm just confirming that that is the section that we are talking about that's been removed from the original motion.
Thank you, Lindsay, for bringing it to our attention. It's now actually on the shared screen. So I'll give people on Teams just a few seconds to read it, but it is actually what you have just said, Councillor Ferris. Okay, I see Councillor Cowan has dropped his hand. Do you want to say anything more, Councillor Ferris? We'll go on to the...
all I'll say is that with the removal of section 4.2, we are fully in supportive of the remaining part of the document and happy for it to go forward.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ferris. So I'm going to go for the vote. All those in favour of the amended motion that you've got in front of you, incorporated in the rest, please raise your hands. Hands down. All those against, please raise their hands. Not see anyone. All those abstaining, please raise your hands. So the report with the amended recommendation has been carried. Thank you very much. We now move on to item 26. 26 changes of the Constitution. Do we have a proposer here? Councillor Halsall. Councillor Halsall, do you have a seconder?
I'll second, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Bowring. So proposals, Councillor Halsall, will you move the report, please?
The proposals for the rejection of any question which has been previously asked, clarifying rules of debate for planning committee, including the prevent and channel programme, are controversial. Amending the anomaly between the standards committee terms of reference and the annual meeting will be. I'm a great believer in individuals taking responsibility for their actions, especially when they have the public's trust. Political parties, and in particular group leaders, must take responsibility for their members. The Standards Committee is in the main an administering committee organising training, agreeing proposals for full council to consider and promoting good behaviour. It is a public meeting. It is also an umbrella for overseeing complaints. The process for overseeing complaints is well defined in 9.1.12, which gives the absolute discretion of the monitoring officer, who after consultation will determine whether the complaint should be accepted for further consideration. The consultation is with the independent person, the chairman of the Standards Committee, unless they are the subject of the complaint. If the monitoring officer decides there is a case to be heard, he will instigate an investigation, which is independently undertaken. If the investigation reveals that there has been a breach of the code, then the monitoring officer can seek to resolve the breach or convene a hearings panel from the Standards Committee, and the process is elaborated in 9.1.15 at length. Obviously, those with an interest are excluded. Hearings are very rare and the outcome goes to full council. It would be of great benefit to the workings of the Standards Committee if senior members of both the opposition and the administration were to be on the committee. It is hoped that group discipline would be at the heart of the Standards Committee. Indeed, I would say that the council would benefit from the leader of the opposition and the leader of the council being on the committee. At the end of the day, group leaders cannot abrogate the conduct of their own members to a third party. They must use their authority to ensure that their members abide by the Nolan principles and the LGA code. This is not marking your own homework, as the procedures in 9.1.1 are so prescriptive but officer managed that independent person led that it is not possible. Those who suggest that this have not done their own homework in understanding what the committee does. Group leaders cannot wash their hands of the actions of their members. We must take that responsibility. We must be seen to take the lead and promote good governance and behaviour. The Standards Committee must not be used as a political arena, nor as an avenue for personal feuding. I commend these alterations to the council.
Thank you, Councillor Halsall. Councillor Bowring, do you want to speak now or reserve your right?
I reserve my right again, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so
We have an amendment, please, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, Councillor Boyd, isn't it?
Yeah, thank you.
Just to remind you, you've all got a copy of, oh, sorry. I have a copy, but the other copy is coming on. I will get the hang of this eventually.
It's very difficult to read, sorry.
Madeline, can you increase the size maybe to 120? Is that better, Councillor Ferris?
Thank you.
Thank you. Right, so I'm going to collect names now for those who wish to. Oh, sorry. Councillor Boyd, please propose. Do you have a seconder, by the way? Thank you, Councillor Duran.
Thank you. Thank you. This is a simple amendment. We'd just like to have the words "or any other committee" removed from 4.295, 4.210.5, 5.429, 5.437. I think it's unreasonable to expect a member of the public to be fully conversant with 6 months worth of all the committees in the council. And similarly, members who ask questions in scrutiny don't always get an answer from an executive member. Quite often the answer is from an officer or from the chair of the committee. And I feel that this is reducing democracy in the council, and we should just remove "or any other committee" from each of these items. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Boyd. Councillor Duran, do you want to speak now or reserve your right?
Yeah, I'll speak now. I'll try to be as brief as I can. Just to kind of go over that, when the public are kind of coming forward with questions, and they're going to be kind of turned down because there was a question was asked in a obscure committee 5 months ago. You know, I want you to think about the image that's going to present to them of this council. You know, when a kind of member of the public comes up with a good question, and you know, takes frankly the leap of courage to come and sit here, perhaps in front of 54 councillors and the officers, and ask that question, you know, I think they should be allowed to do it. And I think we could end up in a situation where we're kind of not looking good in terms of our openness. Another worry is that, you know, this might put some brakes on the scrutiny system. You know, if we're having some question answered, so that's there, that then, you know, members might say to themselves, well, you know, I want to answer that question in full council, or I want to ask that directly to an executive member, and I'm not going to ask the question in scrutiny, because they're kind of barring themselves from doing that naturally, so they can ask it again another time. So we're creating a situation where it kind of devalues scrutiny a bit too, I think. So I think the problem here I've really got is, you know, we make changes to the Constitution to solve problems that come up from time to time. And I'm not sure what problem this particular change is resolving. I don't see hordes of the public asking the same question and again. It's just not happening. So, you know, and even if it was, I'm not sure I'd want to restrict them as members of the public, even if I did. So I think these changes are a bit of a sledgehammer to crack a nut.
Thank you, Councillor Duran. Councillor Halsall, are you willing to accept the amendments? If not, then we will go into debate.
No, sir. The reasoning for it is that the
Councillor Halsall, can we just leave it there and we'll go into the debate? Right. All those who wish to debate the amendment, please can you raise your hand? We'll record it. Please keep your hands up as high as you can. Reach for the stars. Yeah. Okay. And I'm now going to just check with the teams. Councillor Burgess, I see. Councillor Cowan, anyone else? No. So I'm going to call Councillor Cowan first, followed by Councillor Burgess, and then I'm going to come into the chamber.
Thank you for that, Mr. Mayor. I do support the amendment. To me, the intent of it may be honourable in Councillor Halsall's put it, but in reality and in the eyes of the public, it'll be seen as a complete sham and a system where the administration is overruling residents and the right to be able to speak. And had I been there, I would be voting to support the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cowan. Councillor Burgess.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just briefly, questions to committees, as we know, are often answered by the chair of that committee. So just because a committee chair has answered a question by a member of the public, there's no reason why other members of the public should then be denied the opportunity to ask a question directly to the executive member who is directly responsible for their issue, either at executive or at council. So this motion, as it currently is worded, is basically stopping members of the public asking questions of the executive. And that damages democracy, and it also weakens the accountability of the executive members. So that's why I would urge everyone here to support this amendment.
Thank you for your comments. Now, Councillor Smith.
I don't need to talk now. Thank you.
Councillor Cunningham.
Yes, with regards to this, Mr. Mayor, I think that the substantive word is may in the proposal by that we have in front of us, which means that it doesn't mean that questions that may have been asked in committee before will automatically be rejected, but it means that any abuse of the availability of question time can be checked, and that's my view.
Thank you, Councillor Connington. Councillor Bowring?
Mr. Mayor, I think it's really just a tidying up exercise. If someone's already asked a question and got the answer, then if they ask, someone else asks the same question, they'll get an immediate answer from Democratic Services, the answer which was given before, because things move on after 6 months. It would be regarded as a new question. But up to 6 months, I think it's perfectly sensible, and it applies to most of the council committees anyway. It's a perfectly sensible measure to have in place.
Thank you, Councillor Morgetts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was just going to say the point that strikes me from this is it's the chief executive and or mayor chairman. I think we have to accept the judgment of the people put in these positions, to use that judgment wisely. And as my colleague, Councillor Cunnington, has said, the word may is applicable, not will, may.
Thank you. I'm going to go to teams. Councillor Bray and Councillor Burgess, you've still got your hand up. Councillor Bray.
Yeah, I have a point of personal explanation, if I may.
Do you want to let Councillor Burgess go first?
Okay. Remember, Councillor Burgess, a point of personal explanation is only related to any comment that's made about you rather than the topic.
Okay, so point of personal explanation under 4.2.13.14 in response to Councillor Bowring's comments about it being the same question. So when I was speaking, I was saying people have the right should have the right to be able to ask questions directly of the executive. He said that that would be the same
Excuse me, Councillor Burgess.
Previous,
excuse me, Councillor Burgess.
Supplementary.
I do not believe that Councillor Bowring mentioned you. He was talking about the question, and it's point of personal explanation is when someone actually mentions you and says something that's incorrect, and so therefore you have the opportunity to correct it. I don't believe, and I'm looking around officers to confirm that Councillor Bowring actually mentioned you. So that is not a point of personal explanation. So I'm going to move on to Councillor Bray. Please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm also going to refer to Councillor Bowring, but not in a way that I hope that will provoke a point of personal explanation. As he just spoke, he said that people ask a question and they get an answer. And the point I wish to make is that the reason quite often that people ask the same question more again at different forms is actually they haven't got an answer. The quality of answers provided to people is extremely variable, and I think perhaps occasionally attempts to avoid answering a question. So if you haven't got an answer, I think you should be allowed to ask the question until you do get a proper answer. So I would, if I was there and allowed to vote, would be supporting the amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Bray. Councillor Fruin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There's another element to this as well, and that's the logistics and the pressure this is going to put on our officers to monitor all of the questions asked at all of the committees to see whether there's any commonality between the questions. I think the officers have been under enough pressure during the last year without applying any more of this to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fruin. Councillor Murray is the last name on my list.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was purely going to say, for members of the public, surely if they ask a question that's already been substantially asked, they will be provided with the answer that has previously been given, which would be unlikely to have changed in the last 6 months. And for members asking the same question again, or substantially similar questions again, all they're doing is wasting time in the meeting because they should have already received the same answer. So why are they then wasting time when we know that we can't get through all of the business on a lot of our meetings anyway? Why would they waste time asking the same question they've already asked? So I will not be supporting this amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. I'm just going to do one final sweep of the chamber for anybody else who wishes to speak, or on Teams. I can't see anybody. So therefore, I'm going to go over to Councillor Halsall, who has a right of reply on this amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think the issues have been raised really that the fail-safe is the may, and therefore I recommend the original motion to the council.
Thank you, Councillor Halsall. So we're now going to vote on the amendment to see if it passes and becomes a substantive motion. So all those in favour of the amendment, please raise your hands. All those, bring your hands down, please. All those against the amendment, please raise your hands. And hands down, and then all those who wish to abstain, please raise their hands. No one. I've just been told the amendment did not carry, so it falls. So we're back onto the original report and motion. So anybody wishes to speak on the original one? Giving you the opportunity. I've got Councillor Jim Fruin. Would you like to speak?
Just for clarity, we're going through the whole motion, yeah?
That is my understanding.
Yeah. So I'd just like to refer to 9.1.1, the composition of the Standards Committee. I understand what John says about the party, the leader and the leader of the opposition being there. But I would like to suggest that a Standards Committee should be as neutral as possible. And by having the leaders there, I'm not too sure that we stay neutral. I can't support that actually, 9.1.1.
Thank you, Councillor Fruin. I've got two on Teams. Councillor Shepherd-Debay, Imogen Shepherd-Debay.
Good evening. Well, I mean, my whole thing on the report as a whole, obviously in point one, we obviously can understand why our executive might want to add this change. But as Prue said, we'd like to point out that if a member of the public actually got a satisfactory answer from the first question that was asked, then why would anyone need to ask a second question or a different question at another meeting? A good example is what's happened to Louise Timlin earlier in this meeting. She didn't get the answer she wanted. What you're saying is that she'd not be allowed to ask the question again at another meeting where she might get a better answer. In section 3, as Jim referred to, you're proposing to remove the line that forbids the leader of the council from being a member of the Standards Committee. This entry is there for a very good reason, and I believe that the current leader recently fell foul of that point. So is that why this removal of this item is being proposed? In the interest of good council practices, we really cannot support this change. The point also removes the ability for the Standards Committee to elect its own chairman and proposes that this is done during the annual council. Again, something that we really cannot support. It is for these reasons that can I please request that we have a separate vote on items 1 and 3 and 2 and 4. Thank you.
Thank you, Imogen. Councillor Cowan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. For a cabinet executive model of council to be seen to be democratic, there is a need to allow bodies such as overview and scrutiny and standards to be populated by members who themselves are distanced from the close-knit ruling executive. Otherwise, democracy won't seem to be functioning. Picking really up on Councillor Fruin's point, if this is allowed to happen, then what will happen is the standard board could become the judge, jury and executioner, and they will be in charge of every decision made, and they will have the power to get rid of whoever or whomever they choose. And again, had I been there, I would not support this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Cowan. Councillor Burgess.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd also like to request a split vote on this item, please. With regards to recommendation 1, Conservative councillors here this evening have repeatedly said that a repeat question is just the same all over again, so what's the point? But what they seem to forget is that different members of the public may have entirely different supplementary questions on their answers. So the public should have the right to ask their question directly to the executive member and a supplementary, and this is being denied to them under this motion. I also take issue with recommendation 3, regards to standards committee terms of reference. Chairs of committees should be elected by the committee itself and not the situation we have now, where chairs from the ruling group are basically pushed through annual council. And I also do not agree with removing the restriction on members of the executive and the leader themselves being members of the committee. An element of independence from the ruling executive can only be a positive step if this standards committee really wants to meet its objectives.
Thank you, Councillor Burgess. Can I just clarify, Councillor Burgess, are you agreeing with the Liberal Democrat split, which was 1 and 3 and 2 and 4, or are you proposing something else?
Thank you. I would like a separate vote for items 1 and 3. We'd be happy for 2 and 4 to be taken together.
Right, so what you're saying, just to be absolutely clear, a separate vote on 1, a separate vote on 3, and a separate vote on 2 and 4. Okay,
Correct.
thank you. Thank you for your patience. Right. Yes. Yes, we've got Pauline, Councillor Jorgensen, please, and we've got Councillor Murray as well.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to come back on Councillor Burgess and Councillor Fruin's points about the leader and deputy leader. I think it's a bit insulting and probably not at all fair to say that the only people in this chamber that are not capable of being impartial are the leader and potentially the opposition leader, and that everybody else is perfectly capable of being impartial. That just seems to me completely wrong. Sorry? Ah, I'm too short. Pardon me. Did you catch? Shall I do it again? No. Okay. Okay, thanks.
Councillor Murray.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wanted to take issue with something that Councillor Burgess has just said, because if a resident asks a question that is substantively similar to one already asked, they will then be provided with the previous answer. That doesn't stop them from asking any supplementary question that they might have as a question, and then getting a supplementary on top of that. So by doing this, they're not only getting an answer to their original question, they then get an opportunity to ask 2 more. That's better democracy, not worse democracy, in my view.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. So, Councillor Bowring, you reserve the right, if you wish to speak now, please.
No, I don't think I've got anything to add. I think it's a very sensible proposal. I fully support it.
And Councillor Halsall, you've got a right of reply.
I'm really not sure what I'm replying to now. Pardon me? The original. Well, as I said, I believe the proposals are uncontroversial and should benefit the council, the running of the council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Halsall. So I'm going to take recommendation 1 first. All those in favour of the recommendation 1, which is the original one, please put your hands up. Hands down, please. All those against, please raise your hands. Hands down. And just to complete, anyone abstaining? Nope. So that item or recommendation 1 has been carried. I'm now going to do recommendation 3, the other singleton. All those in favour of recommendation 3, please raise their hands. Hands down, please. All those against, please raise your hands. And just to complete, hands down, anyone abstaining? Nope. Recommendation 3 has carried. And now the final two, which is recommendations 2 and 4. All those in favour of 2 and 4, please raise your hands. Or hands down. Anyone against, please raise your hands. Nope. Anyone abstaining? Nope. So 2 and 4 are carried. So all 4 recommendations have carried. Thank you very much. So we're now moving on to item 27, which is the Climate Emergency Action Plan Second Annual Report. Do we have a proposer? Thank you, Councillor Murray. Do you have a seconder?
Councillor Blumenthal.
Thank you very much. Would you like to introduce the report, please?
Mr. Mayor, it's now 2 years since this council declared a climate emergency and committed ourselves to playing as full a role as possible in achieving a carbon neutral Woking Borough by 2030. While many of the council's resources have rightly been redirected to supporting the local fight against COVID, what this year's annual report shows is that work on reducing our carbon footprint has not been deprioritised. Our numerous steps forward over the last year are there for all to read, and it would take too long for me to list all the progress made. To pick out a few personal highlights though, in October I launched the Help to Heat scheme. This zero cost to residents initiative funded insulation improvements to some of the least energy efficient and some of the most at risk of fuel poverty homes in our community. Initially, we aimed to help 400 properties. So far, we've helped over 700, with more in the pipeline. We launched the Community Energy Fund and have submitted a planning application for our first solar farm. We've started the schools refit programme, are near to completing the carbon neutral Dinton Pastures Activity Centre, and have begun a live trial of energy efficiency measures in one of our HRA houses, reducing the energy bill of that property to just £12 a month. As a council, we have been awarded over £2 million in grant funding for our initiatives, including £300,000 from the Woodland Trust, the second highest grant from them in the country. But Mr. Mayor, I know that both you and our residents are more interested in what we're going to do rather than what we have done. So allow me to set out a top-level agenda for the next 12 months. Firstly, we will put climate emergency at the heart of our COVID recovery plan, making Build Back Greener a key message to our business and community engagement. A paper will shortly go to the executive laying out options for community involvement in our climate emergency, benchmarked against a list of processes compiled by the community engagement experts involved. Once approved, our first local deliberative processes can be organised. We will break ground to plant the first of our 250,000 trees, and without preempting the result of the planning application, we also intend to break ground on our first solar farm. Work has begun on drafting supplementary guidance to our local plan, which will put carbon saving and environmental benefit at the centre of future house building. We will launch a future waste strategy aimed at waste reduction as a priority and reaching the maximum levels of recycling achievable. We will also set out a plan to reduce congestion and improve bus services. But Mr. Mayor, as I've already said tonight, we know that substantial behaviour change is the single most important thing that we can do to deliver against climate change. With this in mind, I've tasked the climate officers to make iterative behaviour change the #1 focus of our actions. In discussion with local organisations, we have created the concept of the big idea. Over the next 12 months, we'll be working to engage local businesses, charities, religious groups, schools, communities and others to work on collective behaviour change initiatives together with WBC, their employees, members, pupils, neighbours and each other. The big idea will focus on 8 areas of behaviour change that are essential to achieving carbon neutrality and will dovetail with our local deliberative processes, our efforts to remove the barriers that currently prevent our residents from living more sustainable lives. Mr. Mayor, I take great pride in the fact that highly qualified industry experts have recognised the work of our excellent team of officers as bold leadership in fighting climate change for future generations. I call on all members to do the same and vote to adopt this report.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. Councillor Blumenthal, do you want to speak now or reserve?
I'll speak now. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We know we cannot deliver a net zero carbon borough alone. This is why this council is increasingly focusing on collaboration with residents, businesses and community groups. Councillor Murray has talked about the big idea. This will be crucial to engage local people in the behaviour change that we need to support the carbon reduction that we have to deliver. We want local businesses, schools, places of worship, charities, all to get in touch with us to express interest in the big idea. They're the groups that can have real influence to bring employees, students, parishioners, volunteers on board to embed environmental behaviour change in a structured and impactful way. We all know we can do better in doing our bit for the environment. And I know I certainly can. And having a structured, measurable behaviour change scheme for local organisations for them to get involved in will offer the guidance that a lot of us need. So please, to local organisations, get in touch with us as soon as possible so it can hit the ground running when the big idea launches. Councillor Murray also highlighted the progress being made on our local deliberative processes. But please don't switch off. I know it sounds dull, but it's just a fancy term for something that's really important. It simply means our strategy to engage with local people on decisions around climate change. Ensuring diverse voices from our local community are heard will help ensure making the right decisions. We need active participation from residents who must be consulted on decisions that may impact the way they live their lives. A fuller plan will go to the executive in October, dealing the key focuses we want residents' views on, who to engage with and how. Only from reaching out to residents to listen to them can ensure their voices influence council decisions which will affect us all. Now, I couldn't talk about climate emergency without mentioning air quality. Air quality should be a priority for us all. We've made great strides and continue to treat it with the importance it deserves. Successes have included funding secured to scale up air quality monitoring by placing more units around the borough to measure particulate matter 2.5. Mobile diffusion tubes being placed at six schools in the borough, and a schools competition for car no idling banners being successful, and some put up in hotspots such as Woking train station and along school railings. Despite COVID, we've continued to make bold progress in the fight against climate change. As we all seek to recover from the pandemic, now's the time to step up and build back greener. This report shows this council is doing exactly that. I'd recommend members approve this report.
Thank you, Councillor Blumenthal. Excuse me. Right, anybody wishing to speak, please raise your hands. Okay. Right, thank you very much. I'm going to take the two people from Teams first. Councillor Kerr.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. When this council agreed to declare a climate emergency, it recognised the importance of getting this right because there are no second chances. We voted to set up a cross-party working group to steer the plan. In January of this year, 18 months after that declaration, I wrote to the executive member that has the climate emergency portfolio to express my frustration at the way the climate agenda was progressing. I have received no response. The climate emergency working group is not functioning and hasn't even met in 6 months. It is with great regret that we cannot support the recommendation on the report this evening. This plan is 18 months in and it is 2 years since the climate emergency was declared. We gave the administration the benefit of the doubt last year and supported the plan because we understand the good intentions of what is trying to be achieved. We can no longer support this because we have to succeed, and sadly what has been presented to us isn't going to get us anywhere near. We understand that what we're trying to achieve is incredibly ambitious. It is the ambition and governance that the expert Professor Chatterton has commended the council for, not the actions within it. And the governance process, as I mentioned, isn't even working. Whilst the ambition is commendable, success is marred by what's in the plan. The plan continues to be riddled with questionable assumptions and projections. There have been some improvements, particularly in some of the methodologies used, but there are still some huge gaping holes in this plan that are being ignored and which give an unwarranted level of confidence that we're on track to carbon neutrality. This is life or death for our planet, and our residents deserve better. We know and appreciate this is tough. It's not going to be perfect and things will evolve. What we want, though, is honesty and credibility. Show us the reality and engage with the whole council and community before it's too late, because life depends on it. The resolution asks us to approve the targets and actions in the plan. We support wholeheartedly the aim of the plan to reach carbon neutrality. However, any action this council takes must be in conjunction with reductions in national emissions, and we have no confidence in the plan's assumption for these, which are way above the latest government forecasts. 18 months after the actions were first published, in many cases they still have only the thinnest of plan or plans for how they are to be achieved. We need to be doing better and cannot endorse this level of progress as adequate. For all the good intent, this just isn't enough. Wokingham has to up its game, and our residents deserve nothing less. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Burgess. Sorry, Councillor Kerr. Councillor Burgess, would you like to make your speech?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As we've heard already, it's 2 years since this council declared a climate emergency, and all this time later, this action plan produced is still 67 kilotons short of what is needed. It's scant progress from a year ago when the gap was 73 kilotons. That's 25% of the carbon reductions we need that are still not accounted for. The numbers in this report still don't add up. It's still internally inconsistent, and it's still totally unacceptable that this council is presented with the document where the numbers don't even add up on numerous occasions. Councillor Murray said earlier that we need, and I quote, a very, very clear plan. Well, this is far from it. The Conservatives' refusal so far to commit to a citizens' assembly on the climate emergency shows that it just does not take this issue anywhere near seriously enough. And we see a continuing focus by the Conservatives on numerous small actions that actually have minimal impact on our overall aim to save carbon. Take trees, that's mentioned numerous times. Planting 250,000 trees sounds impressive, but the carbon benefit is just 3.5 kilotons, less than 1% of our current emissions. Take greenway networks. Again, it sounds impressive and it does have other health benefits, but the carbon saving is a minute 4.34 tonnes. That's 0.0007% of our current emissions. And similarly with Woking Borough Council emissions, again, it sounds impressive, but it accounts for just 1.5% of our total emissions. We need to focus on ambitious actions that will really make a difference. So let's look at one of the few large carbon saving targets in this plan, which is retrofitting. Now, retrofitting has to be a key part of the plan. It has to be something that we just have to get right. But it's not clear from this plan even how much carbon the current plans will save. On page 112, it says it will be 35,000 tonnes. On page 149, it says it will be 44,000 tonnes. This same magic 9,000 tonnes of carbon that's added in was added in last year to the report, and it's still not been corrected a year later. And to come on to the detail, the Energy Company Obligation Scheme and the Green Homes Grant Scheme are exclusively for those on lower incomes and our more vulnerable residents. Now, they should be prioritised, but it does mean only a proportion of our residents will qualify. But perhaps of most concern is the Green Bank Scheme is still included in this report, despite the fact that the Council's legal department have reviewed this and said it's not going to go ahead. So with all three elements of retrofitting either limited in scope, limited by time, or actually cancelled, it remains entirely unclear how much carbon this will save. As for electric vehicles, back in November 2020, the Conservative government pledged to ban the registration of 100% of new petrol and diesel cars by 2030. Meanwhile, in Wokingham, our Conservative plan says that only 50% of new registered vehicles will be electric. The fact is we cannot trust what the government says on this or what is presented in this document. It's still not a credible plan to help Wokingham Borough play its part in tackling the climate emergency.
Thank you, Councillor Burgess. Councillor Swaddle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Having chaired the Climate Emergency Task and Finish Group, which was set up by Overruled Scrutiny in 2020 and again this year, I've worked with a highly inquiring and effective cross-party group of my councillor colleagues, and I'm indeed proud of this bold and ambitious plan. It was praised by the experts and the leading academics who we invited to give evidence. Professor Paul Chatterton of the University of Leeds told us that this council's approach remains in advance of many councils across the country, and using an action plan like this with specific targets is a good way to address the issues. I believe Wokingham is leading the way with our policies to tackle the complex challenges here in our borough. Thanks and credit are rightly due to the hard-working team of officers supporting and developing the policies of this Conservative administration. And we are all keenly aware that this is a living document. It has to evolve. And as Councillor Murray mentioned earlier this evening, the Task and Finish Group our final report has made recommendations because our role is to be a critical friend. These recommendations are going to be presented to the exec in September, when I hope they will be adopted to strengthen the plan and to bolster its ability to achieve our quite right ambition of being a net zero carbon borough by 2030. So I support this and encourage you all to do likewise. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Swaddle. Councillor Bass.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to help and support my colleagues, Gregor and Laura, with the climate emergency plan by putting together a Wokingham Borough's waste strategy, treating waste as a resource and maximising value for money. I want to minimise the waste, encourage reuse and more recycling. Through the strategy, I want to deliver a new long-term waste strategy Wokingham Borough is crying out loud for. Review the waste management best practices, review Wokingham's waste tonnages, strengthen our role within the RE3 partnership, maximise the climate neutrality benefits. All this will happen through a vigorous communication campaign. Waste management best practices. That will be minimising waste at source, home composting, for instance, lobbying supermarkets and Amazon, reuse and repair, sell or give away items rather than dispose, recycle, ensure the heaviest recycled waste material is separated, recovery, ensuring that the residual waste is recovered for energy. There are some fantastic waste management opportunities for Wokingham Borough. Waste prevention, avoiding waste wherever possible, behavioural change and communications is best practice. Working with the industry to stop and reduce packaging. Waste minimisation, home composting I already mentioned, lobbying manufacturers and supermarkets. Waste reuse, signposting reuse outlets, and recycling, of course. Focus on the heaviest items, which is food. Focus on November 20. We focused on November 2020 waste composition analysis to target communications, and we looked at the blue bag waste composition in November 2020. There was found to be paper, card, metals, plastics, garden waste, textiles, glass, and of course the recyclables. But all that is fantastic amount where we can, if we recycled all those, we can save millions of pounds. So in summary, waste minimisation is a key to reducing costs. Maximising recycling participation of our excellent collection service, communications and behavioural change, strengthening WCBC role in RE3, and working with the industry to reduce waste generated. So, Mr. Mayor, to help the climate emergency, the next steps would be to draft waste strategy to overview and scrutiny by September 2021, draft waste strategy to executive by 2021.
Can I stop you, Councillor Bass?
So, of course.
Your time is up.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jorgensen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just like to add some more proof of the council's commitment to help the residents adopt sustainable transport modes as part of this initiative. We've commissioned multiple new cycleways to give better routes and link up journeys using route demand analysis, so we know where people are going, where they're coming from, and how we link the cycleways together. The LCWIP, Local Cycling, Walking and Infrastructure Plan, has been asking residents what they see as the main enhancements which will improve their ability to use sustainable transport, particularly cycling and walking, and we're using point funding to fix those issues. We've also built one new park and ride and commissioned 2 more recently. We've continued with schemes to help children influence their parents to adopt sustainable transport to schools. For example, new improved routes to school, the hugely popular Beat the Street game, which I think a lot of people have enjoyed, and also cycling challenges, which help schools improve their cycling and walking initiatives provide encouragement to children, and also provide them with prizes, which allows them to invest in cycling infrastructure like scooters and cycle racks and that sort of stuff. These are just a few of the things that the council is doing to help mode shift to more sustainable transport.
Thank you, Councillor Jorgens. Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The points I was going to make have already been covered, but I do approve this progress report and the targets and actions that are included.
Thank you. Councillor Duran.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It was my amendment, seconded by Councillor Jones, that was accepted unanimously when this council declared a climate emergency 2 years ago. Now, last time we were presented with this plan, we pointed out its multiple huge flaws and the fact it was, by definition, a plan for failure, and thus we voted against it. Nothing has changed. We just heard a gushing account of corporate speak and imagery, but this is still a tremendously unserious plan for the most serious problem we face. It's why we campaigned for a genuinely independent citizens' assembly to bring the focus that would be required. There are two main points that need bringing out, one that already has, so I'll gloss over that. Stated clearly in its own terms, it's a plan for failure. It will fall short of its goal by 67,000 tonnes of CO2 in 2030. And secondly, that shortfall is calculated on the basis of hitting every single target in this plan. And it's a fantasy plan. The number of vehicles on our roads are set to magically reduce. The number of miles they travel will miraculously shrink. The number of people carried on our non-existent public transport system will increase, all while tens of millions are spent by this council on new roads to serve massive new housing estates. Some of the targets in the plan are detailed, evidenced, and costed, but they are nearly all related to small, insignificant carbon reductions. Nearly all the targets containing the major carbon reductions that this plan relies on are vague, unevidenced, and uncosted. This plan requires not so much a leap of faith as 6 rounds of the Olympic triple jump of faith. While I recognise there are a few good things within the plan and that lots of work has been carried out on it, I cannot support it in its current state.
Thank you, Councillor Duran. Councillor Kaiser on Teams.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I mean, I sit here, I would say that over the last 2 years, I wish I could have built more social housing. I wish I could have made more relief available for the poorest. Now, there are lots of things I'd like to have done over the last 2 years, but I think there's a lot of experts in this chamber who seem to have missed the point that for the last 2 years, what we've done as a council has been severely curtailed. I think making the original brave step some 2 years ago and putting the funding behind it was the first step. We were leading with the majority of councils. We were out in the front. A lot of councils followed our lead. And it's very easy for Councillor Durek to be glib about building houses. Where do you think people are going to live? It's the people that support you that need housing, the poor people. So, you know, the whole thing is got to be fit into what we do as a council, because if we don't, we will never ever get there. We must deal with the knitting. And at the moment, that knitting tends to be COVID and some of the poverty that we've got around the place with which this COVID has brought us. So I will support it. I would support it if I was there tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Kaiser. Just going to do one last sweep before we go. Okay, so we've got Councillor Fruin. If you'd like to speak now.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've watched this plan develop over the last 2 years, and do I understand it all? No. Have I read it all yet? No. But do I recognise that it's a really good attempt to get us started on climate emergency? There are a number of things in there which may only be small at this moment and which will grow. There's a certain emphasis on changing behaviours. Each of those behaviour changes is a small contribution. Some of the things in there may be small contributions, but they're a lead to behaviour change. I will support this report tonight. Is it perfect? No. Could it be better? Yes. Are there things in there that are perhaps wrong? Yes, but it's a step forward and I support it.
Thank you, Councillor Frewen. Councillor Fishwick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is an extremely important document and it's likely to be the most important one this decade. Whilst there are some good intents in this action plan, this Conservative administration's plan is not pulling in the same direction. For example, the average journey length by car is 3.2 kilometres. Analysis indicates that around 60% of car journeys are only up to 5 kilometres. The action plan in Target 4 states the use of all cars, vans and motorbikes as a mode of transport decreases from 74% to 56% in 2030. But on the other hand, this administration is spending 17 million on improvements to traffic flow and easing congestion through various measures. Improving traffic flow in this way will be a short-term fix. We are in a climate emergency and the focus instead must be on modal shift, such as improving walking and cycling, which in the action plan is a big winner, but does not have sufficient resource allocated to it. Looking at a map of the borough, the vast majority of residents live within 5 kilometres radius of the geographic centre, within the 60% of car journeys and easy to cycle distance. Instead, this administration continues to be encouraging more car use. This policy has failed before and will fail again. Therefore, because climate change is such an important issue, I am not supporting the recommendation. As I said earlier, this document is likely to be the most important one this decade. The frequency and intensity of extreme weather events are occurring far more often. We therefore must get it right. There is no second chance with climate emergency and the clock is ticking fast. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Fishwick. Any more? Otherwise, we'll go back to Gregor to do a right to reply. Gregor, Councillor Murray.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There's a couple of points that I would make here. The first is that once again, I have to say, please don't mistake the opposition's passionate opinion for fact. The Liberal Democrats, for example, have said that the plan falls short and that it isn't sufficient. But their spokesman on climate emergency was frequently in the newspaper before the elections misrepresenting how the national grid works. So I don't really put much stay in their opinion when it comes to climate emergency or how to go about solving this problem. In response to the point about citizens' assemblies, we've looked at citizens' assemblies, we've looked at all the different forms of local deliberative process. A paper has been prepared on it. Experts, including Extinction Rebellion, say that a citizens' assembly is what they're calling for nationally, but locally they want other forms of local deliberative process related to specific areas of behaviour change, and that is exactly what we are delivering. To the Labour point, there is no golden bullet in climate emergency. I really wish there was a switch that we could flick and immediately cut our carbon footprint in half. And if the Labour group knows what it is, please tell me. But so far, all they've come up with is citizens' assemblies, which experts have said will not be the most effective for our carbon emergency. I also was quite interested to hear what Councillor Burgess had to say about the Green Bank. I don't know where she's got her information from, but I had a meeting with 2 external bodies on the Green Bank only 2 weeks ago, one of which has a live trial with another council right now. And they're looking at expanding that trial into Wokingham with us. We've also got conversations ongoing with 3 other external organisations in relation to the Green Bank. So why she's in the newspaper and why she's going around saying that the Green Bank is dead is based on false information. And I feel sorry for her because she keeps saying it and it simply is not true. In summary, we are the party that have a plan. We are the only people that have a plan. The opposition have shown that they're ill-informed. They repeatedly give inaccurate information. And if they don't support the plan, I really am not bothered by that.
Councillor Burgess, I guess you've got a point of personal explanation?
I do indeed, yeah. Councillor Murray can find that information in the minutes on and the agenda items in the Ophi and Scrutiny Management Committee. You find it there that says that the legal department reviewed it and said it wasn't going to go ahead. Thank
That's interesting, Mr. Mayor, as the legal department haven't been a part of any of the conversations I've had in relation to the Green Bank with any external bodies yet.
And thank you, Councillor Burgess. That was a very good example of what a point of personal explanation is. So thank you for showing us all that. I'm now going to move to the vote. All those in favour of the report, please show. Raise your hands. Hands down, please. All those against, please raise your hands. Hands down. And anyone abstaining? Nope. And the report has been carried. The recommendation has been carried. Thank you very much. So we now move on to item 28, which is the health scrutiny arrangements across Buckinghamshire, Berkshire West Integrated Care Service. Do we have a proposer?
Me, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Margaret. Do you have a seconder?
Councillor Cunnington.
Okay, would you like to introduce the report, please?
Be happy to, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, thank you. The item before you is related to the health reforms introduced recently by central government. Under these reforms, CCGs are being abolished and healthcare will be coordinated and managed by a larger body called an ICS. The ICS Wokingham would join is called BOB, West Berkshire, Oxfordshire and Buckinghamshire. Part of this process involves setting up a new scrutiny body, a joint health scrutiny body, which would consist of members of all the councils in the ICS, and their role would be to scrutinise regional health decisions, such as setting up of hospitals, etc., which affect the whole region. We in Wokingham believe that as much scrutiny as possible should be kept local, and it should be done by local members who are elected by local people. Therefore, we were instinctively very suspicious of this proposal. However, it became very clear from the legislation that this body will progress whether we join it or not. Therefore, to have any voice on this matter, we have to join. I had 2 meetings with my opposite numbers in Reading and West Berkshire earlier this year and found they shared my concerns. We therefore agreed on a common approach to try which outlines as follows. This body should simply not exist to be an easy way for the NHS to pass measures through and avoid questions from local councils. We therefore agreed that we would work together to keep as many decisions as possible local, and that would mean that this JHOSC body would meet as infrequently as possible and only when absolutely essential. We also agreed that we would meet before any JHOSC meeting to agree a Berkshire West approach to make sure our voice is heard and not outweighed by the other areas. The method by which it is decided what goes to the new JHOSC is to be designed. We, as per every other council, have the right of veto on this method. Therefore, I'm recommending to you, Mr. Mayor, that we join this committee, as it would proceed without us if we did not. If we did not join, Wokingham would have no voice at all. We will work with our neighbouring Berkshire authorities to agree a common approach wherever possible and to maximise our voice. I'd also make it clear that we will work to ensure this body only meets on truly regional issues and that as much scrutiny as possible is kept local. In my mind, as I've said, it should meet as little as possible, and this is what we'll work to achieve. Mr. Mayor, I've shared my cynicism with, not cynicism, that's the wrong word, my doubts over basically the wisdom of this proposal. But I will say that it is happening, basically, it is going forwards, and we will work basically in the most constructive way possible to get the best deal for Wokingham as we can. Therefore, I'd ask for a member's agreement to support Wokingham joining HOSC. On a final footnote, I'd say refer members to recommendation 5. At the time this paper was written, and at the time I appeared before the Health Overview and Scrutiny Committee in this room a week or 2 ago, it was uncertain whether we'd be in Bob, basically, but that's been confirmed as of this afternoon. So this is now fact. And basically, I'd ask members to support this tonight so we can join this committee and move this forward.
Thank you, Councillor Margaret. Councillor Cunningham, do you want to speak now or reserve?
No, can I reserve my rights?
Right, thank you. Can I have hands up for those people who wish to speak on this item? Councillor Jones. Okay, anybody on Teams? I can't see anybody on Teams at the moment who wants to speak. So, Councillor Jones, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. These new plans, I believe, were originally put forward by the former Secretary of State for Health, Matt Hancock. We don't know if his successor is as keen on them as he was. There was some original confusion in the Department of Health as to whether it would be Buckinghamshire, Oxfordshire and West Berkshire or just Berkshire. But I think that Charles just confirmed that it was now Bob. Is that right? Yeah, thank you. That was when there was a confusion. It was not very satisfactory state of affairs to have this lack of clarity and confusion within the government, but then it is something that we've come to expect from them. It appears to be clear from the debates held at overview and scrutiny that this change was going ahead, as Charles has just indicated a couple of times, in whatever guise, whether there was opposition to it or not. These new arrangements may well be an advantage to scrutinise regional subjects, but local health overview and scrutiny committees must retain the right and the ability to scrutinise local NHS bodies, such as the Royal Berkshire Hospital NHS Foundation Trust. I'm aware that the Executive Member for Health, Wellbeing and Adult Social Care has reservations about these new arrangements, and we share them. We will be voting in favour of this item this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Doing one last sweep. I can't see anybody else wishing to speak either on Teams or in the chamber. So over to Councillor Cunnington to do your speech.
Mr. Mayor, I have nothing substantial to add to what Councillor Margetts has said, and there's been nothing raised in any other questions which might need to be addressed. So therefore, I simply support the proposal.
Thank you, Councillor Margetts. So you have a right to reply before we go to the vote.
Thank you. Very briefly, Mr. Mayor, I'd say I welcome the comments of Councillor Jones, basically the support of the Liberal Democrats, and just would reassure members that we will work to make the best out of this possible for Wokingham.
Thank you, Councillor Margetts. So we have the report in front of you. All those in favour, please raise your hands. Lower your hands, please. All those against, please show. Anyone abstaining, please show. So that report has been carried with its recommendations. Thank you very much. Moving on to item 29, which is the annual report Wokingham Borough Wellbeing Board. Do we have a proposer?
Me, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Do you have a seconder?
Councillor Cunnington.
Okay, thank you. Could you please introduce the report?
I should be brief on this one because the report is in the agenda. Just to pick out a few key points out of it. Over the last 2 years, we tried to refocus the Health and Wellbeing Board. When I first joined the group, it was full of lengthy presentations, not much discussion, basically, and not much analysis. We've tried to make it more business focused and actually get more input into it. But that is still a work in progress. We've also strengthened the role of the voluntary sector this year and added another representative from the Wokingham Volunteer Centre. The key focus of the group this year has been COVID, obviously via the Local Outbreak Engagement Board in particular, which has helped focus on the strategy and the response that we've been dealing with. I'd also bring out the strategy into action section, which picks up the 3 priorities of the Wellbeing Board: creating physically active communities, reducing social isolation, and narrowing inequalities. The sections on Design Our Neighbourhood and the Better Care Fund. We're working at the moment on the Wokingham Health Plan, which basically picks out the priorities identified by the NHS market research and puts a Wokingham focus on them. And they'll be coming forward, I would expect, to the council later this year. I'd like to thank all the partners who've worked with us this year, from the CCG, from the voluntary sector, everyone who's participated, but in particular to the three officers who've helped me immensely move this forward, Matt Pope, Martin Sloan and Ingrid Slade. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Margetts. Is there anybody who wishes to speak on this report? I can't see anybody in the chamber. Anybody on Teams? Nope. So back to you, Councillor Cunnington, to do your second speech.
Thank you. I have nothing to offer, and I suggest that we simply receive this report as it is.
All right, thank you. Councillor Margetts, you do have a right to reply. I think I know what it's going to be.
I'm happy, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. So all those in favour in the report, please show.
John.
Thank you very much. So we're moving on to item 30, the member question time. Can I remind people, members, that when you come to a supplementary, they must relate either to the original question or the response that has been given, and can be no longer than 1 minute, and it will be timed. And executive members, the responses to questions and supplementaries are limited to 2 minutes as well. Yeah. So the first question is from Councillor Cowan to ask his question of Councillor Smith. Please answer your question, Councillor Cowan.
Thank you. In the recent Hall Farm housing workshop, which you attended for 4,500 plus houses and other infrastructure support, why did the council officers and the consultants disregard the impact of Bearwood Lakes Dam on the assessment when the dam is a Category A dam and the various flood inundation emergency maps from Woking Council, Peter Brett Associates and the Environment Agency suggest the flooding would cause would extend extensively into the area considered for housing, schools, shops and roads, etc., with possible loss of life? Thank you.
Councillor Smith.
Evening, Gary.
Evening.
Not only did I attend the group, but I was in the breakout session with you. It is entirely inaccurate to say that any risk has been disregarded or that any intent to endanger life through these discussions. Quite the contrary. The Hall Farm workshop you attended acknowledged and considered all the relevant specialist advice and constraints, including flooding and inundation. In the light of this consideration, with attention to the appropriate national guidance, it went on to assess the potential options for development as part of the evidence base for our local plan update. In the event that the council's executive do agree a site allocation as part of the new local plan, all relevant national policies and environmental regulations would shape the plan and making the process. The final proposals would be addressed through the subsequent detailed planning, design and relevant regulatory processes. Thank you.
Councillor Cowan, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. To change Bearwood Lakes into a Category A dam from a Category B dam, factors must have been taken into consideration, as the council, by its own admission, used health and safety as the reason to cut down 500 mature trees by Bearwood Lakes on the pretext of not putting the lives of the construction workers working there at risk. Why is health and safety considered okay to protect these construction workers, but although you seem to suggest differently, is disregarded when a burst with 4,500 houses below it would generate loss of life in the future? And recent events in Germany can show how devastating water can be, yet you're suggesting a lot of houses by a source of a danger. Thank you.
I'm not suggesting anything. What I said to you is that it will be taken into account as we go through the process. And I've never suggested it would be endangering life. We would take all that as we go through the process and take the master planning. And when it comes back, we were looking at the necessary regulatory processes, as I pointed out.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Can I call on Councillor Akhtar to ask his question of Councillor Bath?
Mr. Mayor, I'm very sorry to interrupt, but may I propose under the Council's Rule 4.2.12M that we extend the meeting for a further 30 minutes to enable us to make more headway with the agenda.
Thank you, Councillor Conway. Do you have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Jones. We'll go to the vote on that. All those in favour of the 30-minute extension, please raise your hands. All those against, please raise your hands. Any abstentions, please? Nope. Unfortunately, Councillor Conway, your proposal has fallen. So, Councillor Akhtar, would you like to ask your question of Councillor Bath, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is, having spoken to some of the residents in my ward, the issue of dog mess has become an increased problem since the start of lockdown. With a number of other local authorities putting a cap on the number of dogs to be walked by one person in a park, would the council support a similar measure in Wokingham Borough, for example, 5 dogs per person? We have seen examples in the borough where some dog walkers are walking 10 dogs at a time, even more, in one park, and are unable to maintain control because of this.
Councillor Akhtar, thank you for your question. On the issue of dog fouling, the service's approach to dog fouling is to promote responsible dog ownership. Working with residents, the council's website allows members of the public to create online location reporting. The information from these reports are assessed by the officers and are used to inform them of any area of concern that may require additional patrols. The website also raises awareness and promotes responsible behaviour. On the aspect of dog walking, dog walkers are identified as being the persons responsible whilst in charge of the dogs under the Animal Welfare Act 2006. Although professional dog walking is not a licensed activity and number walked by the walkers cannot be restricted through licensing conditions, the numbers of dogs walked are primarily set in accordance with non-binding industry standard and on liability insurance to around 4 dogs per walker. Where antisocial behaviour is an issue, the council can impose limitations using powers set out within the antisocial behaviour. Although there are currently insufficient numbers of complaints received by the council to argue limit dog walkers numbers under the proposed public spaces protection order, officers are actively investigating the application of a cap as well as timescales for implementations within parks and recreation facilities. So watch this space.
Thank you, Councillor Bath. Councillor Akhtar, have you got a supplementary?
No, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So the next person is Councillor Shepherd de Bay to ask a question of Councillor Jorgensen.
When is the construction actually going to start on the Winnish Park and Ride double decking? It was scheduled to start last January.
Thank you, Rochelle, for your question. The expansionist park and ride site and the associated surrounding public areas and accesses involve a number of landowners and interested parties. Whilst we intended to commence construction earlier this year, resolving the interrelated procurement and legal issue has caused some unavoidable delays. It's worth noting that this is a complicated project that involves the council undertaking work on behalf of and funded by the property company that owns Winnish Triangle Business Park, Fraser's Property. In addition, Fraser's Property will be completing some public realm improvements with their own contractor, and we've had to work closely with them to agree programming cost and land ownership issues. On a more positive note, the project is progressing behind the scenes, and the steel work required for the decking of the car park has already been ordered and is currently being manufactured. Work on site is now expected to commence on the 2nd of August, with a large portion of the car park closing until summer 2022.
Thank you, Councillor Jorgensen. Do you have a supplementary, Councillor Shepherd? Do they?
Okay. In January, the park and ride had almost no people there. The park and ride itself was canceled and traffic was almost zero. It could have been done at that point with absolutely little or no effect to the local people. Why wasn't it started then? You said it's because of all these other kind of problems. However, those have never come up in the last 5 years when this was proposed.
I agree with you. It would have been much better if it started earlier. However, we can't start work until we've got the contract sorted out and until we ensure value for money for council.
Thank you, Councillor Jorgensen. Councillor Younis, you have a question of Councillor Halsall.
Thank you. My question is to the leader of the council. Can you please tell the residents what is being done to entrench fairness and equality of opportunities across the council?
Thank you for your question, Shahid. Our community vision is for Wokingham Borough to be a great place to live, learn, work and grow, and a great place to do business. Wokingham Borough Council's Equality Plan 2021 to 2025, Tackling Equality Together, has 3 key drivers. To ensure our community vision is successfully delivered for all our residents, irrespective of their background or characteristics. To fulfil our duties and responsibilities under the Equality Act as a public body, to build and support a diverse, inclusive and engaged workforce, and meet our responsibilities as an employer. Equality, diversity, and inclusion are essential to the way we operate as a community leader, a service provider, and an employer. Wokingham Borough is fully committed to tackling inequality together, and our equality plan will drive our commitment, leadership, and collaboration over the next 4 years to build a more equal and inclusive borough, where all residents are able to prosper and thrive. The council will deliver this ambition through its Equality Action Plan, driving the 3 priorities to ensure fairness and equality of opportunity both across the Wokingham Borough and within the council. Listen and to learn from our communities and use this to deliver services that work well for everyone. Act on our commitments to equality, diversity and inclusion in the way we plan, deliver and shape our services, and build a diverse and engaged workforce where everyone is expected. Under the key driver number 3, we commit to promoting equality and diversity amongst our workforce through 2 specific objectives. We will support staff at all levels of the organisation, including our leadership, to equip them with the right tools to understand how best to tackle inequality and meet the needs of our increasingly diverse community. We will honour the commitments agreed in our Quality Workforce Monitoring Report to help strengthen our approach to equality, diversity and inclusion in our workplace. The council has 29.
Councillor, unfortunately, you've run out of time. Councillor Younis, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, I do. Can you please share any specific examples of how we are showing our commitment to equality more widely in our borough? Some more specific examples. Thank you.
The council has 29 equality actions to deliver in the first year of the plan, 2021-22. The programme to deliver our equality plan is now well underway, and the programme board, led by Keely Clements, met recently. You will be reassured to know that the programme is on track and has been reinforced by recent appointment of the new equality lead, Ali Lane Smith, who joins us to bring senior insight, advice and leadership to this critical area. Whilst the delivery plan is in early stages, it has started to deliver results. Berkshire Council's Equality Group has been founded and is led by Wokingham Borough Council, allowing all the councils across Berkshire to share best practice and gain insight from one another. Importantly, the council has published an equality profile to
equip residents, businesses, officers with insight into how the borough is made up. A new equalities intranet pages for staff have been created. A new ethnically diverse staff network has been launched. A new applicant tracking system to monitor recruitment activity has been deployed. The council has also wished all our Muslim residents and colleagues Eid al-Adha Mubarak on the 20th of June. Wow. On the 14th of July, we hosted our first ever youth council involving local secondary schools. And on the 2nd of July, we flew the Pride flag and hosted a number of celebratory Pride events. In May, the council supported Mental Health Awareness Week. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Horsall. The next one is Councillor Fishwick. Can you ask your question of Councillor Jorgensen, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. At the annual council meeting on the 20th of May 2021, a member question was raised by Councillor Rachel Burgess. Item 12.6 refers. In response to the question, Councillor Pauline Jorgensen stated that the planned National Cycle Network 422 was built in phases, and until July 2020, the entire length of the A329 met our standards and recommended best practice. However, Local Transport Note 2/08 Cycle Infrastructure Design was published 6 years before the first phase was started. And in September 2012, Local Transport Note 1/12 was introduced. The guidance issued in these two documents has not been introduced on the phased NCN 422, where the road space could have been reallocated to provide high quality, safe cycling and walking routes. Instead, the Borough Council has consistently delivered a substandard cycling and walking network and acknowledged by you in your response, and I quote, that the on-off road layout are less than ideal and are unlikely to encourage new cyclists. Therefore, spending £6 million in the process has been poor value for money, with little change in modal shift to cycling. Would you agree?
Councillor Jorgensen.
Thank you, Paul. No, I wouldn't agree. The business case was independently assessed by the LEP, who part funded the project, to be good value for money, and the infrastructure we've provided is significantly better than what was there before. The scheme, which was developed using the principles in our adopted cycling infrastructure style guide, which reflected national policies and Department of Transport Local Transport Note 2/8, cycle infrastructure design, and 1/12 shared routes for pedestrians and cyclists, and international best practice where applicable, and also responds to research and publications such as the Manual for Streets, TRL, and Local Cyclists. This is effectively a repeat of the question I answered in May. The document you mentioned has expressed a general preference for on-carriageway provision of cycles over shared routes, and states that where it is decided to introduce shared use facility along a road, it's important the needs of cyclists choose to remain on the carriageway are not ignored. This is what's been delivered. As you will be aware, we've committed significant investment in cycling and walking infrastructure in the last few years, including Greenways project, as well as providing infrastructure on our new roads, which at the time of inception was seen as progressive and ambitious. Council is committed to follow LTN 120 as wherever possible in future schemes, but upgrading all our existing cycle infrastructure will clearly be a major exercise and is programmed over a number of years. We will be reviewing our major active travel routes in light of the guidance and part of our work of developing a borough-wide local cycling and walking infrastructure plan. In addition, we've started detailed design on our first scheme based on LTN 120 guidance, which will form a new route from Woodley to Palmer Park in Reading. This will give everybody an impression of the level of infrastructure we want to deliver in future.
Thank you, Councillor Jorgensen. Councillor Fishwick, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, I do. Thank you. And thank you for your response to the question. I disagree with the response. Greenways are not a strategic part of the network, and you keep repeating that in several answers which you give to me. So my question is, so when will this council put pedestrians and cyclists first in its highway design instead of the motorised vehicle?
Councillor Jorgensen.
Thank you, Paul. We'll agree to differ, I think. Unlike some opposition parties, we the Conservatives believe in carrot, not stick. We're working to make alternatives to the car more attractive and usable, rather than introducing anti-car measures. Recent experience in COVID is that reducing congestion not only reduces frustration, but also reduces idling and roadside pollution. We will continue to work to improve the cycling and walking infrastructure, and I'm committed to that.
Thank you, Councillor Jorgensen. Next question, Councillor Boyd, to Councillor Bath.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is, I understand that the unusually wet weather has played havoc with the grass cutting schedule, and I've received a number of complaints on this issue. I would like to be able to reassure residents that their road hasn't been missed, but the only information available is the weekly grass cutting schedule, which will say something vague like, we will continue cutting in Winnersh and commence cutting in early. This is very frustrating. When can members and residents expect the comprehensive up-to-date information on grounds maintenance, routes, performance and customer feedback using new technology as part of 21st Century Council via the WBC website, which was promised in November 2018?
Councillor Bath.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Boyd, for that question. Yes, the weather has played havoc and it's affected the grass cutting schedule. But work is currently in progress within our IT department to look at ways for our customers to report and track progress of grounds maintenance issues directly on the website. And the new system, I'm pleased to say, it should be in place by March of next year, which is at the beginning of the next grass cutting season. So you should be able to get all that technology to actually track and report things like the highways. You report, what do they call them? So yeah, the new system should be in place by March next year.
Councillor Boyd, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, please. Thank you. Well, I'm pleased to hear that this system will be up and running next year, because it's been promised for a very long time. I looked back through various scrutiny meetings and found it kept being promised. So that's an advantage. Can you tell me how interactive it might be? Will residents be able to know which areas have been designated for rewilding so that they don't end up phoning up their councillors reporting that the verges haven't been cut? Will they be able to suggest areas for rewilding? Will they be able to just interact a little bit more with it rather than it being information for them? Will it be a two-way process for the residents? Do you know?
Councillor Bath.
Thank you for that supplementary. Yes, I think it will be a very interactive system that will be put in place, and it will answer all your questions that you asked in your supplementary. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kerr on Teams, can you ask your question of Councillor Bath?
Thank you very much. Quite similar line of questioning to Councillor Boyd. This council, as part of its environmental commitments, needs to ensure that while some open spaces like play parks and some roadside verges are regularly cut, it takes the opportunity to improve biodiversity in other public areas by turning them into native wildflower meadows. To ensure that the council's grass cutting contractor doesn't accidentally cut these areas, and to mitigate any complaints from the public regarding perceived neglect of such areas, will this council please adopt the Blue Heart plaque scheme, installing these plaques in wildflower sites and issuing a series of public communications to raise awareness?
Councillor Bath.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Sarah. That's an excellent suggestion, and we are currently looking at ways we can improve biodiversity on council maintained land. In particular, how we can work with our contractors and to clearly identify areas of wildlife value and have clear communication with the public and contractor operative to make sure these areas designated for biodiversity are understood and maintained appropriately. In some areas, this identification may be in the form of a blue campaign plaque, but this may not be suitable for all the cases. We recognise that a larger piece of work is required to get this across the whole borough, and plan on working more closely with local community groups, towns and parishes who are already doing great work for biodiversity. This will enable us to build on local knowledge and help identify and improve wildlife in suitable areas. We will promote the Blue campaign through communicated with towns and parishes and interested parties.
Thank you, Councillor Bath. Councillor Kerr, have you got a supplementary?
Yes, it's just really quick. Thank you. I'm really pleased with what you're saying there. Yeah, just to sort of build on what Councillor Boyd was saying, we obviously have the opportunity as members of the public to report problems. We have a system set up, and it's more about actually making suggestions. So it would be good if residents can actually go through the council website and have an easy to use function to do that. So can I just have your assurance that there is going to be a very easy process for residents to request the Blue Heart plaque campaigns and to actually suggest areas for rewilding, please?
Councillor Bass?
You have my assurance.
Thank you.
Short and sharp, I like them. Councillor Smith, you would you like to ask your question to Councillor Howe, please?
Good evening. Yeah, in the last 2 years, children have left school without the usual rituals, parties, balls and group farewells, what one might call rites of passage. And this is after a very unusual year or two of schooling. Whilst many will go on to university or college, which will help support their mental health and well-being, my concern are those children left trying to find work in an economy recovering from COVID. What extra help are you providing to support young adults with both job seeking and their mental health over the next years? Thank you.
Councillor Howe.
Thank you, Councillor Smith, for that very important question, which I'm pleased to address. These have been challenging years for many children and young people, and they've had to endure changes in their modes of education, social isolations, examinations, results arrangements that sit outside of the norm, and they've done so with huge resilience. However, some of these challenges have had a marked impact on their emotional well-being and mental health. With the economic challenges that have arisen as a result of the pandemic, job search for young people leaving school is also more difficult. Now, the council's NEAT, I'll explain that one, not in education, employment or training, in case you didn't know. The council's NEAT prevention team have worked closely with schools to identify young people that are considered at high risk of becoming NEAT at the end of the academic year. These young people will be contacted by a qualified advisor over the coming months and offered support to help them identify their career goals and to create a detailed action plan to support them to achieve this. The team has been working closely with the Economic Prosperity and Place team, Job Centre Plus, to develop plans for an employment and skills hub in the town centre, which will provide a one-stop shop for anyone looking for work in the whole of the borough. Young people will be able to access expert advice and support to help them navigate their way into sustained employment or education provided by the NEAT prevention team. Optalis supported employment, JCP, Young Persons, Claims Advisor, and the National Careers Service are all accessible to them. The hub will also provide access to local opportunity providers, including colleges, training providers, and recruiting employers. Access to computers and the internet will be available to support independent job search. We're finalising our search for premises, but it is hoped that the hub will be open before the end of the year. By the end of September 2021, the NEAT prevention team will have confirmed all that young people.
Unfortunately, Councillor Howe, your time is up.
Well, perhaps I'll pick it up in the supplementary.
Councillor Smith, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, there's sort of two parts to it. You mentioned them picking up children at risk at school, but what happens when they've left school and it happens during their job search? And secondly, are you envisaging a bigger budget to help cover what I foresee quite a few mental health problems? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think it's worth going on with the rest because it will answer your question.
Okay.
So the NEAT prevention team have confirmed that all young people who are eligible for a guaranteed offer for a place in education or training have received one and will support those who have not yet received an offer or who have been rejected, or who have rejected it to progress into employment or training. Now, In addition, the council is part of the National Kickstart programme, which offers 6 months paid work experience to young people. That's age 16 to 25, which I think answers your post-school question, who are unemployed and we currently have less than 13 young people on placement throughout the directorates, and we have more vacancies that we're identifying in the pipeline. In respect of mental well-being, support is available to children and young people in Wokingham in a range of actions that have been taken by Wokingham Borough Council and the partners which aim to support and respond to children and young people's needs, I beg your pardon, at the earliest possible opportunity, including extending funding for existing services such as ARC youth counselling, the continued commissioning of online counselling, which is launched on the 1st of July 2020 for young people aged 11 to 18. We're undertaking a review of the way that we deliver emotional health and wellbeing support to children and for young people across Wokingham, and are proposing a series of changes that we think will improve the service offer and ensure children receive the right support at the earliest opportunity. We're working with the Berkshire Healthcare Foundation Trust to provide Tier 2 primary health and mental health services in Wokingham, and a small team of primary mental health practitioners will be co-located with children's services staff.
Councillor Howe, you've run out of time again.
Again?
Sorry.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you.
That's the end of the members' question time. By my record, we've got 3 minutes left before the end of the meeting. So I have to use those 3 minutes. I'm looking for someone on Teams who want to ask a question on minutes of committee meetings. And right, Rachel Burgess is the first one to raise their hand. So Councillor Burgess, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I've got a question for the Executive Member for Highways. At the top of Oak Avenue, which is the new road running through the new Keephatch estate, there, Keephatch Gardens, there's a stretch of the Binfield Road where there's no pavement to link pedestrians between that new estate and the Carina Drive estate and quite large residential areas beyond. There is a clear desire line there. You can see the verges worn with pedestrian footmarks, but a proper pavement would obviously be much more suitable and safe. I've been asking officers about this for about a year now with no noticeable progress. So could I ask the executive member to commit to looking into and progressing this issue to promote more walking and active travel in Norries?
Yes, of course, Rachel.
You have one minute.
Yes, of course, Rachel. And if you wouldn't mind sending me the email you sent to the officers, I'll make sure you get an answer.
Okay, thank you. One quick question. We've got 1 minute left. Bearing in mind it's a question and the answer. I'm going to go to Councillor Conway.
What an honour, thank you. My question is to the Executive Member for Highways. She'll be aware that I've requested a pedestrian crossing on the Wargrave Road in Twyford, south of the A4 roundabout, to enable pupils walking to and from this Piggott Senior School to make their journeys more safely. Will she undertake to do all she can to expedite the installation of this crossing?
I seem to recall the answer I gave you last time was that I would talk to the local members, which I don't think.
No, this is a different,
crossing.
Completely different issue.
Okay. Yes, I'll look into it. Thank you.
Thank you, both Councillor Burgess and Councillor Conway for getting 2 questions in about 3 minutes. We are about 15 seconds away from 10:30. Thank you. I'd like to thank you all for the way you've conducted yourselves tonight. It's yet another improvement. I think we're well on the track. I would like to put on record thanks to the electricians, because those of you who are sitting over there may have realised that the issue has been addressed. And thank you for Anne for driving that. And the final thing I'm going to say on the stroke of 22:30 is that a councillor has mentioned that last meeting, when individuals left the chamber, they were congregating, and the suggestion was they were congregating too close. So as you leave, can you just remember that there are still recommendations for social distancing, because I don't want another email from the councillor complaining. Thank you very much. And say good night.